Hereby call this open session council meeting to order, held Monday, June 25th, 2018. I'd like to ask everyone to please rise for a moment of silence. Please be seated. Before we continue on with the agenda, I'll just call on Councillor Kett.
Thank you, Mayor. I've been requested by the Mayor, and I am apologizing for neglecting to inform fellow councillors and staff of a time to meet for the big announcement on last Friday, 2 Fridays ago. I'm also apologize to the regional staff who were informed of the time, but were not informed that township staff weren't.
Okay, and you're going to follow up with an email to the parties so that...
That's correct.
Thank you very much. I accept the sincere apology, and I hope the rest of council does too. We will continue on with the council meeting today. We'll start off with disclosure of pecuniary interests and the nature thereof. I have a declaration, seems to be the norm. Page 9.1.10, page 60 and 63 is Scugog Accessibility Advisory Committee meeting number 5, May 31st, 2018. There's mention of Stockworth development. So because my residence is across the street from this future development, it's pecuniary interest, and at that time I'll relinquish the chair for the minutes, so they will be pulled from the consent agenda so it can be voted on and discussed if necessary separately. Any other pecuniary? Councillor Kett?
Thank you, Mayor. 9.2.17 is about me, so I will not be voting on the matter.
Okay, thank you. Next, any other pecuniary interest? Oh, yeah. And yes, Councillor Watton sends her regrets. He is not, she's out of the country for this meeting. And Councillor Somerville is at a graduation ceremony for one of her grandchildren, so she will be arriving later today. And she's already given some advance notice of some reports, so that if we, she's asked kindly if they can be just deferred to the latter part if she's not here yet, and so we'll do that when the time comes on a couple of reports. So I'll go into those details later. All right, announcements from councillor staff. Starting off with Councillor Guido, and Councillor Drew.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As most of our residents should be well aware, last week we were the host for a movie shoot. Hallmark Movie of the Week was filmed here last week, and it allowed for a lot of excitement in our downtown. But I would like to take this opportunity to formally thank our Director of Communications, Ms. Lori Bauer, for all of her work that she did to ensure that not only our building owners, our store owners, but that the liaison between the film staff and the township, without her assistance, I don't think it would have gone as smoothly. So Lori, thank you very much for your involvement on that. Secondly, I'm sure most of our residents are aware, but I would like to do one final reminder that until further notice, the fairgrounds are closed for public use as of right now due to the damage that was done to one of the buildings located on the lands in the windstorm in May. It had to be closed for the safety of our community and our public that uses it. So as a reminder to please not use those grounds until it has been reopened, and we will ensure that communications go out when it is reopened. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Drew.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was pleased to attend the AGM of Lake Ridge Health, and it was held last week at Ajax Hospital. Also attended the flag raising for celebrating the Indigenous peoples on the 21st at the regional headquarters. Very nice ceremony. And wanted to just let everybody know that on June the 11th, one of our citizens, Kent Farndale, was presented with an honorary credential in community development at the Durham College convocation ceremonies. That is because of her volunteerism and her involvement in many groups and organizations in advancing them forward in their mandate. That's one of 7 certificates of community development that have been awarded since Durham College first started. So that's a long time. So maybe, Mr. Mayor, we could send a letter of congratulations to Kent Farndale. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Other announcements from council? Okay, seeing none, announcements from staff? All right, we'll move on to presentations. Councillor Kett?
Thank you, Mayor. I'd just like to preface this with CAO has some great news about an expansion of one of our businesses. I'd like him to mention that. It's in our agenda.
To you, Mr. Mayor, I believe that Councillor Kett is talking about the mushroom farm on, which is in the agenda on item, I'll just refer to it, item 926. I'm sure Council has seen this, but maybe for the public. Tri-Grow Enterprise Limited, or Greenwood Mushroom Farm, is adding a substantial addition to its premises, 150,000 square feet as a matter of fact. And they will be commencing shortly over the summer with the foundation. And trying to remember, Councilor, 150? 100, thank you. 100 jobs will be added to the community, which is really good news. And I was told that there's an equivalent of about, is it 15? I'll have to reference the report. There's an equivalency for the number of acreage that's under this roof. It's a substantive investment in any event in the community, and we're very pleased to see it come together.
And that's 140 this month. We've got new jobs.
And we know, as we know from being at the region and delegations there, there's a lot of activity and eyes for expanding another existing businesses. And like we've always said, it's much more rewarding and easier to expand existing businesses that are already here and than it is to try and attract new ones. So we're very pleased to always hear the news of those that are doing successfully enough to expand, and it's great for the workforce and employment opportunities, and also great for just the future viability and economic sustainability of the township. So, any other announcements from council staff? Okay. All right, we'll move on to our light agenda tonight. The last scheduled meeting before the summer recess, and sure it's going to be a long one, so we'll try and move through this expeditiously. First is the presentations and delegations. We have representatives from BDO, Matthew Hare and Trina Connell from BDO, the township auditors and external accountants. So if you guys come forward, and there's a report, just so council knows, 9.2.14 that I would like to bring forward after the presentation so that we can deal with it all at once. Welcome, you know the drill. This is just make sure the mics move, and to make sure we can hear you with the buttons pushed.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having us here today. Matthew is going to do the presentation for us tonight, and he's going to go through your statements for you.
There we go. Good evening, Mayor and Councilors. Thank you for having us here to present the financial statements for the Township of Scugog for December 31st, 2017. The financial statements are intended to report on the financial position of the Township as at December 31st, 2017, to ensure accountability and transparency and to assist the Township with long-term and strategic planning. Financial statements are an important tool for Council and and Scugog administration to use to report to the taxpayers on the municipal services provided with the resources at their disposal. Management's responsibility is the preparation and fair presentation of the financial statements in accordance with Canadian public sector accounting standards.
Matt, I just wanted you to pull the mic a little bit closer. Yeah.
Is that better?
That's better.
Okay. Management is also responsible for having the necessary internal controls in place to allow for the preparation of financial statements that are free from material misstatement. Our responsibility is to express an opinion on the financial statements based on our audit, to conduct the audit under Canadian generally accepted audit standards, to plan the audit to obtain reasonable assurance that the consolidated financial statements are free from material misstatement, to perform procedures to obtain audit evidence to support the amounts and disclosures in the consolidated financial statements, to evaluate the appropriateness of the accounting policies, and to evaluate the reasonableness of management's estimates. Based on the work we've performed, we're able to provide the following audit opinion: that the consolidated financial statements present fairly, in all material respects, the financial position of the corporation of the Township of Scugog. Turning to the Statement of Financial Position, which is page 4. We've provided a definition for what a financial asset is. Financial assets generally consist of cash and cash equivalents, taxes receivable, accounts receivable, and inventory for resale. Overall, the financial assets have increased $2.7 million in 2017. This is mostly due to an increase in cash of approximately $900,000. We'll discuss that in a future slide on the cash flow statement. The financial assets have also increased due to a $1.9 million increase in
Hereby call this open session council meeting to order, held Monday, June 25th, 2018. I'd like to ask everyone to please rise for a moment of silence. Please be seated. Before we continue on with the agenda, I'll just call on Councillor Kett.
Thank you, Mayor. I've been requested by the mayor, and I am apologizing for neglecting to inform fellow councilors and staff of a time to meet for the big announcement on last Friday, 2 Fridays ago. I'm also apologize to the regional staff who were informed of the time, but were not informed that township staff weren't.
Okay, and you're going to follow up with an email to the parties so that...
That's correct.
Thank you very much. I accept the sincere apology, and I hope the rest of council does too. We will continue on with the council meeting today. We'll start off with disclosure of pecuniary interests and the nature thereof. I have a declaration, seems to be the norm. Page 9.1.10, page 60 and 63 is Scugog Accessibility Advisory Committee meeting number 5, May 31st, 2018. There's mention of Stockworth development. So because my residence is across the street from this future development, it's pecuniary interest, and at that time I'll relinquish the chair for the minutes, so they will be pulled from the consent agenda so it can be voted on and discussed if necessary separately. Any other pecuniary? Councillor Kett?
Thank you, Mayor. 9.2.17 is about me, so I will not be voting on the matter.
Okay, thank you. Next, any other pecuniary interest? Oh, yeah. And, yes, Councillor Watton sends her regrets. She is not, she's out of the country for this meeting. And Councillor Somerville is at a graduation ceremony for one of her grandchildren, so she will be arriving later today. And she's already given some advance notice and some reports, so that if we, she's asked kindly if they can be just deferred to the latter part if she's not here yet, and so we'll do that when the time comes on a couple reports, so I'll go into those details later. All right, announcements from council or staff. Starting off with Councillor Guido, and Councillor Drew.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As most of our residents should be well aware, last week we were the host for a movie shoot. Hallmark Movie of the Week was filmed here last week, and it allowed for a lot of excitement in our downtown. But I would like to take this opportunity to formally thank our Director of Communications, Ms. Lori Bauer, for all of her work that she did to ensure that not only our building owners, our store owners, but that the liaison between the film staff and the township. Without her assistance, I don't think it would have gone as smoothly. So, Lori, thank you very much for your involvement on that. Secondly, I'm sure most of our residents are aware, but I would like to do one final reminder that until further notice, the fairgrounds are closed for public use as of right now due to the damage that was done to one of the buildings located on the lands in the windstorm in May. It had to be closed for the safety of our community and our public that uses it. So as a reminder to please not use those grounds until it has been reopened, and we will ensure that communications go out when it is reopened. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Drew.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was pleased to attend the AGM of Lake Ridge Health, and it was held last week at Ajax Hospital. Also attended the flag raising for celebrating the Indigenous peoples on the 21st at the regional headquarters. Very nice ceremony. And wanted to just let everybody know that on June the 11th, one of our citizens, Kent Farndale, was presented with an honorary credential in community development at the Durham College convocation ceremonies. That is because of her volunteerism and her involvement in many groups and organizations in advancing them forward in their mandate. That's one of 7 certificates of community development that have been awarded since Durham College first started. So that's a long time. So maybe, Mr. Mayor, we could send a letter of congratulations to Kent Farndale. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. Other announcements from council? Okay, seeing none. Announcements from staff? All right, we'll move on to presentations. Councillor Kett.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd just like to preface this with a CAO has some great news about an expansion of one of our businesses. I'd like him to mention that. It's in our agenda.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I believe that Councillor Kett is talking about the mushroom farm on which is in the agenda on item, I'll just refer to it, item 926. I'm sure Council has seen this, but maybe for the public. Tri-Grow Enterprise Limited, or Greenwood Mushroom Farm, is adding a substantial addition to its premises, 150,000 square feet, as a matter of fact. And they will be commencing shortly over the summer with the foundation. And trying to remember, Councilor, 150? 100, thank you. 100 jobs will be added to the community, which is really good news. And I was told that there's an equivalent of about, is it 15? I'll have to reference the report. There's an equivalency for the number of acreage that's under this roof. It's a substantive investment in any event in the community, and we're very pleased to see it come together.
and that's 140 this month we've got new jobs.
Oh, and we know, as we know from being at the region and delegations there, there's a lot of activity and eyes for expanding another existing businesses, and like we've always said, it's much more rewarding and easier to expand existing businesses that are already here and than it is to try and attract new ones. So we're very pleased to always hear the news of those that are doing successfully enough to expand, and it's great for the workforce and employment opportunities, and also great for just the future viability and economic sustainability of the township. So, any other announcements from council staff? Okay. All right, we'll move on to our light agenda tonight. The last scheduled meeting before the summer recess, and sure it's going to be a long one, so we'll try and move through this expeditiously. First is the presentations and delegations. We have representatives from BDO, Matthew Hare and Trina Connell from BDO, the township auditors and external accountants. So if you guys come forward, and there's a report, just so council knows, 9.2.14 that I would like to bring forward after the presentation so that we can deal with it all at once. Welcome, you know the drill. This is just make sure, the mics move, and to make sure we can hear you with the buttons pushed.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having us here today. Matthew is going to do the presentation for us tonight, and he's going to go through your statements for you.
There we go. Good evening, Mayor and Councilors. Thank you for having us here to present the financial statements for the Township of Scugog for December 31st, 2017. The financial statements are intended to report on the financial position of the Township as at December 31st, 2017, to ensure accountability and transparency and to assist the Township with long-term and strategic planning. Financial statements are an important tool for Council and Scugog administration to use to report to the taxpayers on the municipal services provided with the resources at their disposal. Management's responsibility is the preparation and fair presentation of the financial statements in accordance with Canadian public sector accounting standards.
I just wanted you to pull the mic a little bit closer. Is
that better?
That's better.
Okay. Management is also responsible for having the necessary internal controls in place to allow for the preparation of financial statements that are free from material misstatement. Our responsibility is to express an opinion on the financial statements based on our audit, to conduct the audit under Canadian generally accepted audit standards, to plan the audit to obtain reasonable assurance that the consolidated financial statements are free from material misstatement, to perform procedures to obtain audit evidence to support the amounts and disclosures in the consolidated financial statements, to evaluate the appropriateness of the accounting policies, and to evaluate the reasonableness of management's estimates. Based on the work we've performed, we're able to provide the following audit opinion: that the consolidated financial statements present fairly, in all material respects, the financial position of the corporation of the Township of Scugog. Turning to the Statement of Financial Position, which is page 4, we've provided a definition for what a financial asset is. Financial assets generally consist of cash and cash equivalents, taxes receivable, accounts receivable, and inventory for resale. Overall, the financial assets have increased $2.7 million in 2017. This is mostly due to an increase in cash of approximately $900,000. We'll discuss that in the future slide on the cash flow statement. The financial assets have also increased due to a $1.9 million increase in 1.8 million of this relates to Scugog Line 6 funding, where work was completed at the end of the year for the expense and had not been received by the end of the year. Looking below the liabilities, the net financial assets, form a part of the financial position and is the difference between the financial assets and the financial liabilities. Overall, the net financial assets of the township are $14.5 million, which is a decrease of $600,000 from the prior year. As previously discussed, the financial assets have increased to $2.7 million. However, the liabilities have also increased by approximately $3.3 million, resulting in a decrease in net assets. The increase in liabilities are a result of new debt of $1.7 million for the Scugog Line 6 project. Accounts payable increase of $1 million, of which $730,000 relate to Scugog Line 6, which relates to outstanding payments and holdbacks at the end of the year. In addition, the accrual for payroll increased to $100,000, which was due to the timing of the last payroll at the end of the year. Deferred revenue has increased $385,000. The most significant amount deferred was $133,000 for the Healthy Lake Scugog grant, $35,000 in OCIF funding, which was not completely used up by the end of the year. Other liabilities increased $293,000 as a result of an increase in deposits. The most significant increase was due to the large deposits on new subdivisions. Below this is the non-financial assets. Non-financial assets are normally used to deliver services and are primarily comprised of tangible capital assets. Capital outlays in 2017 amounted to $7 million. The main capital outlays this year were for an acquisition of work in progress, which was mainly relating to the construction of the Scugog Line 6. This accounts for $4.1 million of the $4.7 million of the work in progress balance. Once completed, the work in progress balance will be transferred into the tangible capital assets. Overall, the tangible capital assets decreased as a result of amortization and disposal of assets exceeding the capital additions. Capital outlays included in tangible capital assets for 2017 include road resurfacing and treatment for various roads, and the addition of a number of township vehicles, and a new fire truck and grader. Turning to page 5, the consolidated statement of operations. This chart above shows the makeup of the revenue and expense base. In the current year, the taxation revenue made up the largest amount in terms of percentage of overall revenue. This has decreased 6% from 60% in 2016. The second largest piece is the user fees, which has decreased 23% from 15% in 2016. Grants have increased 13% from 10% in 2016, and the casino and other revenue have remained fairly consistent year over year. The percentages in the current year are skewed slightly due to the increase in grant revenue in the current year. The increase was $3.2 million, which was mainly due to the funding for the Scugog Line 6 project. Moving down to the expense side, the largest expense is salaries, which has increased 2% to 42%. This was due to the growth in the township and implementation of new programs in the Recreation Department. Materials had decreased 4% from the prior year. This was due to the large bad debt balances in the prior year and green bank expenses, which were incurred in 2016. The contracted services, amortization, interest, and financial expenses and transfers to others have remained comparable to the prior years. Overall, your revenue balance is $21,798,629. Revenues overall have increased $2.9 million from the prior year. This increase is due to mainly the increase in grant revenue, as already discussed, which was from federal, provincial, and municipal funding for Scugog Line 6. In addition, there was an increase in tax levy of $526,000, which was budgeted for. This was offset by a decrease in user charges of $315,000, which was due to tipping and environmental assessment fees in the prior year, which were not incurred in 2017. In addition, the contributed assets of $700,000 in 2016 was due to the assumption of Easy Street in the current year, there were no assumptions, and so there was no balance. Moving to the expense side, the total expenses in the current year were $19,828,888. The expenses have decreased $313,000 from the prior year. The main cause of this is due to a decrease in the general government expenses, which have decreased $390,000 from the prior year. This was due to bad debt expenses in the prior year and consulting fees relating to the Green Bank, which were incurred in 2016 and not in 2017. Recreation expenses decreased $263,000 in the current year due to a $28,000 decrease in arena booth costs as the booth was sold in 2017. $30,000 decrease in utilities due to LED light savings. $80,000 decrease in equipment repairs and hall repairs, which were completed in 2016. Planning and development expenses increased $195,000 in the current year due to $140,000 in increase in planning staff due to an increase in workload, which was caused by growth. An offset to this was a $50,000 decrease in BIA expenditures due to the restructuring of the BIA, and a $40,000 decrease in consulting fees due to fewer OMB hearings in 2017. The next chart attached shows a 5-year change in expenses by department. The majority of the expenses have remained consistent over the past 5 years. The most significant increase is in transportation of approximately $1 million over the past 5 years, as the township continues to maintain and upgrade infrastructure within the township. The next chart shows an overall revenue and expenditure as well as annual surplus and deficit for the current year and the preceding 4 years. Overall revenue has fluctuated based on grant revenue in the current year, which has increased due to the funding for the Line 6 project. Expenses have remained consistent over the past 3 years and remain around $20 million after increasing steadily in 2013 and 2014 from $18 million. The annual surplus over the past 5 years has fluctuated between a deficit of $2 million to a surplus of $2 million. The next slide here shows a chart that of available cash for use by removing amortization from the current year surplus. This is compared to the purchased TCAs in the current year, and the difference represents a cash shortfall or surplus. It should be noted that although the surplus is sufficient to cover TCA purchases, the annual surplus should be sufficient to cover amortization as well in order to maintain the accumulated TCAs already owned by the township. As noted on the blue chart there, the WIP has increased significantly in 2017 and relates almost entirely to the Scugog Line 6 project. This amount is a capital asset addition. However, the amount is not being amortized in the current year due to the project not being completed. A significant amount of this project, however, is funded through the provincial and federal grants. At the end here, the annual surplus and deficit is $1,969,714 for the current year, which is an increase from the prior year deficit of $1.293 million. This next chart here provides a summary of surplus and debt over the past 5 years. Net financial assets have been steadily increasing in the past few years. This year there was a decrease due to the addition of municipal debt relating to the Scugog Line 6 project. The debenture debt has increased in the current year due to financing for the Scugog Line 6 project, in addition to the existing capital lease obligations from the prior years. Annual surplus seen this year as an outcome of current operations. Moving on to page 7. The statement of cash flow is a required statement that identifies where cash came from, shows how cash was used, and provides details on changes in cash and cash equivalents since the previous reporting period. Overall, your cash position increased by $920,000, which is significantly lower than 2016, but still in a positive position. The cash flow statement on page 7 starts with your operating surplus after adjustments for non-capital items of $6.3 million, less the decrease in current accounts of $175,000 to bring available cash to $6.1 million. Following that is the capital purchases and disposals, which is $6.8 million, mostly related to the work in progress for the Line 6 project. Add the cash flows from financing of $1.6 million due to the new loan from the Scugog Line 6 project, and that results in a $920,000 increase in cash flows in the current year. Following this are the notes to the financial statements, which contain important information and explanations. The notes highlight various aspects of the financial statements and provide background information and insight on the impacts of specific values on the financial statements. And we don't usually go through them in detail, but if you have any questions, please let us know. That's it.
Okay, that's great. Thank you for the summary of that, and the report is pretty detailed, so we've all read that. So we'll go to questions. I'll start off with Councillor Kett.
Thank you, Mayor. I was glad to see the BIA in there this year. On page 5, I'm just going to go back to it, you mentioned levies. Could you just go over that again, or the very top one?
The taxation
The
levy for
revenues,
the-
taxation levy?
Yeah.
Just what Matt said, like, it
Well, I
didn't...
think the taxation increased, sorry. The taxation revenues increased, and it was exactly to budget, so it was on budget, is what he said.
Yeah, but you said a percentage, was it
Oh, the
down 2% or
percentage.
something?
Oh, okay.
It was down 6%. The main reason for it is it is skewed percentage-wise by the amount of grant revenue, increasing the overall revenue by such a large percentage that it caused a decrease in the taxation revenue. So there's a bit of skew this year based on the size of the grant revenue increase.
Okay, so from just a simple person's...
In the numbers
View here.
side, your tax revenue has increased by $500,000
Yeah.
in the current year, which was budgeted for. It's just, in terms of a percentage-wise, it hasn't increased because it has been skewed by other line items, such as grant revenue affecting the total revenue.
Councillor Back.
Thank you, through the mayor. And first off, I want to thank our staff for applying for all the grants that we've suddenly had. When we first took this term of council, not many grants were being applied for, and you can see clearly in this presentation how much on a small municipality those grants really do help us, and we won't get anything done without those other levels of government. So I really, truly appreciate the staff that are writing these grants. They obviously have a talent for them because we are getting them, and they are actually doing them, which is, they're tedious to do, but much needed and much appreciated by all of the taxpayers. You know, it shows here as debt, but I would consider it good debt, you know, low interest rates, and that debt, especially for Line 6, $6 million of road work, that's huge, and we would never have been able to do it on our own. So, really want to emphasize that that is a good debt to be in. With regards to the BIA...
I'm just gonna, I just want to make sure it's clear there. I don't want it to go on the public, the previous council wasn't applying for grants. They were, they just weren't successful because of whatever reasons at the time. There were many grants that were applied for sure. It's just, there were lots of reasons that were given. Because the township didn't have debt was one of the reasons the province gave why they weren't successful on getting it, because I know the Line 6 was actually applied for. So I just want to make sure that your message was that you're happy that staff is applying for the grants, but and that we're being successful.
I get you,
on it.
Mr. Mayor, but the fact of the matter is, our current staff is applying for more grants.
Yes.
That is a fact, and I really do appreciate it. With regards to the BIA, I need some clarification. So and I don't know which numbers you're looking at. Are you looking at the top number of the page or the bottom number of the page of your report? I have 233 and I have 52. So I don't know which one is your... Oh, no. It's the It's the statement of operations. So, let me just get my thoughts together here. The township had paid, or the township was paid by the BIA in 2017 with regards to how we were then going to be changing how the BIA solely had the levy and was not flowing through the accounts payable. Was that amount 26,000 to the, I'm just trying to think of the amount that we paid off. 19? Where is that shown here? It's just this accumulated surplus, that 47,000, and then accumulated surplus beginning of the year, 53,371. I know that's a bit of a sticking point with the BIA because that really wasn't the case because we had to pay that off and it's not reflected here. It's just showing that there's more cash or more surplus than really there was in theory because of that payment made to the township. Is it reflected anywhere in here?
The payment made to the township, so last year it was showing as a liability to the township, so that liability has now been removed. Sorry. So it has been reflected, that payment, absolutely.
But it's not reflected with regards to a surplus because that 19,000 was taken out of that amount. Like, I don't see it here reflected. Like, there was not 47,000. That was reduced significantly with that payment.
Councillor Baxter referring to page 52 on the statements there, which is the BIA statement of operations.
So, sir, you're referring to the $42,312?
We have an annual surplus of 47,000 and an accumulated surplus at the beginning of the year of 53,371. And was it February, or when was that paid to the township? February?
When exactly was it paid? I don't have...
No, it was paid in that year, so I'm just wondering why it's... There definitely wasn't close to 100,000 surplus in cash with the BIA.
But that's your accumulated surplus, the 80,598? At the bottom is your accumulated surplus.
But can you please explain that? Because there isn't $100,000 in any bank account or account for the BIA. Yeah. There's absolutely, it's
okay,
not
so
that amount.
The BIA has $44,899 of cash, like in their bank accounts, plus an investment of $2,000, and they have a receivable from HST of $7,000. So your total assets is $54,072. Your payables at the end of the year was $15,786. So netting those out, your net assets is $38,000. The additional pieces come from your TCA, your tangible assets that you have within that the BIA owns. So that's accumulated assets that over the years that have gone up. So the net book value of them is $41,000. So you don't have cash of $41,000, but you have assets of $41,000.
So do those assets include lamp posts and whatnot? Because there's definitely not, like I'm looking here as well, a little bit further on, the leasehold improvements or the amortization of expense. Like there's what was left when for the BIA with regards to any office furniture or equipment, really the value's close to nothing. So are these assets more the benches and...
Yeah, it's a wide variety of assets that you've accumulated. So yes, definitely the benches, and I don't have the whole list in front of me, but I've gone through those. Every year we go through those assets, and everybody says they have all been accounted for and counted, and they're still good assets for your operation.
Okay, but with regards to any office furniture or that, because there is none, that's been eliminated? Was that reduced?
Well, they're saying there's still some there because there's still a value. No,
There
it's
are.
down to zero because cost and accumulated, so it's at a net of zero.
Okay.
So the cost of your leaseholds is $39.84, and the amortization is $39.84, so they net out to zero.
Okay, perfect, because there is no value.
Right.
And then just one more question, where it states that the BIA, there's still a caution with regards to not using public sector accounting practices.
You know, note number 1, the budget.
It's sort of a common theme throughout here, but it's it's on page 57.
Yep, so that's a very common comment in public sector. People don't budget for amortization, and so we just adjust for that, and so that's just very common in most municipal statements.
So there's nothing that the BIA can do to make you happier with regards to not having that statement on there?
Yeah, you can budget for amortization during your process, and then that note's removed, because your budget then agrees to what's presented on the statement of operations.
Perfect, thank you.
Other questions for, okay, and I just wanted to make sure, Councillor Back, did you answer all your questions that were on the report too? That was going to be pulled forward? Okay, so I did have one comment here, which I had a lot of my questions answered ahead of time, and it was just more of a, the recognition of the work in progress for line 6 is such a large asset, and I was just questioning when I was looking at that, the matching principle that we had, if the full liability is recognized, why isn't that asset moved up to the roads, for example, in the consolidated statements? So, and then, so I just wanted even it to be noted with note 13, I think it is, for the consolidated on, if I get to the right page, 21, the 2017 one, that recognizes that it's not, I know somewhere else it was noted, and in the report that it will be recognized when it's fully complete, but I just thought it would be prudent to have a note number there, or footnote or something to say that.
On page 23 of our statement, so after the long pages, there is at the top of the page, it says discuss.
Yeah, so I just said, I know that discussed it, but I just thought on the consolidated one, it should have a little subscript 13 there, so that it's noted on the consolidated ones. I don't know, I thought you noted something else somewhere on one of the reports, and I just thought it would have been good to note that work in progress, because when I was first looking at it, I saw that was, my first question was how come that isn't matching, and then I thought, isn't that a principle to match the asset that is?
Well, actually, the matching principle is gone.
So.
But the rule is that if the asset is not being used, you can't amortize it.
Right.
What the rule is. So it is held down and work in process. But if you want additional verbiage added to it, we can work with Diane and add to that.
No, and I guess my point was is that so much of that was already being used and near completion. There was just waiting for the spring for the final top coat, and I just thought the statements would reflect the amount that was actually the value of that asset that was increased. So all I was suggesting is a note there, a reference to the note on there, so that it would,
There is a reference to the note.
On page,
On the statement of financial position, work in process.
do you do any notes though on the consolidated ones? Just because that's where it breaks down the road network column there, and you see what the additions and so on page 21.
Oh, on the okay.
Yes,
There.
that's all I was just saying, just a note 13 under the road network heading or something, just because then it would reference that. I know it's on the following page, but when I was looking at it, I was going, hey, wait a minute, where's the assets that we put into there? And that's all I was just suggesting there, and I understand that, the matching of that is still to come, so the 2018 statements will show the full amount of the asset in the road asset column. Yeah. Okay, and that was it. Yep. So, all right. No further questions from council. I need a mover and a seconder for the presentation to be received. Moved by Councillor Guido, second by Councillor Kett. All those in favor? carried. And then the actual report recommendation, since I wanted to pull it forward, 9.2.14, the draft consolidated statements. And I need a mover and a second for that. Councillor Back, you pulled it. Do you want to move it? And then second by Councillor Drew. Questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Carried. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. Much shorter than normal, so have a safe drive up north. Thanks. All right. Next up, we have the consent agenda. So just going to reiterate the items that have been pulled already. So 9.1.6, which is the April 24th. Which one did you want pulled, Councillor Back? May 29th. Well, you have here April 24th one. Okay, so this sheet is a little bit off, so I just want to make sure the descriptions are right. Which one you wanted the May 29th one pulled? Okay, so we're just fixing this on the fly. So nobody wanted the April 24th minutes pulled? Okay. And next we had the School Environmental Advisory Committee, May 11th. Councillor Drew? Yes, okay. The next is the School Accessibility Advisory Committee, which is pulled for pecuniary interest for me. Next is resurfacing on Spring Boulevard, Councillor Back. And next is the traffic bylaw amendment, Councillor Back. Next is the Old Mill lease, Councillor Somerville and Councillor Back. Next is Councillor Somerville wanted the bylaw enforcement vehicle replacement pulled. Councillor Back, the Animal Control Services Shelter Agreement. And then Councillor Back and Councillor Drew, the Paxton Street bylaw. And then procurement bylaw update by Councillor Back. And we've already dealt with the consolidated financial statements. And then regional report, Councillor Back. Is that correct? And then Councillor Back, the review of Councillor Kett's expenses. And that is all that I have pulled. Any other pulls? Yeah, and the related bylaw is also pulled with those ones, so that everybody knows on each of those items that have a bylaw in place. Seeing no further pulls, I need a mover and a seconder for the remainder. Moved by Councillor Drew, second by Councillor Guido. All those in favor? Carried. Next, start off with Councillor Back on the May 29th Waterfront Phase 2 Advisory Committee minutes.
And thank you. Through the mayor, on page 43, with regards to the committee recommendation that the staff representative or designate of the Port Perry Downtown Waterfront Revitalization Project Phase 2 Advisory Committee attend the scheduled waterfront meetings in June and September, as well as future meetings. Has there been any discussion with staff? I guess this is to our CAO, if that will be the case.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. I guess first, with respect to this, I'd like to know, what the purpose of attending would be and what the need would be. This committee, the Director of Development Services is assigned as the project lead for the work that this subcommittee is carrying out to investigate the Phase 2 waterfront strategy. And I know that although he doesn't attend regularly, he is available to provide any advice or input that's needed from the committee. And I know that he's had, a meeting with the chair. He's provided feedback and emails as requested. And I think that attendance has been a function of, best use of his time. For instance, he's at a meeting this evening, and whether he's, value added and needed at the meetings, we do follow the minutes, and then we try to, provide the assistance as the subcommittee sees fit. So I'm not sure, I'm trying to be respectful of his time, and there isn't a designate person, so to say, and when you look at the terms of reference, there's just that he's the lead with respect to that project, and that could be fulfilled in a number of ways. It doesn't mean attendance at every meeting.
Okay, because I know that there's been a lot of stop-starts with this particular committee, and the committee really strongly feels that if they had Director Heritage's input and his expertise, things could probably move along a little smoother and a little bit more fluid with regards to communications with staff and committee and council. I know our former director was always present at these meetings, and it's felt by the committee that they really would benefit by Director Heritage attending, if we want to actually get somewhere with this project.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. And in that respect, we want the committee to succeed, and I just want to reassure you and council that my door is open, Director Heritage's door is open, they answer the telephone, they want to meet at any time, they want to discuss any of the issues, we're available. With respect to this next meeting, which I understand is tomorrow night, it's a little short notice for Mr. Heritage, but we definitely can look forward to the September meeting. And if it's not Mr. Heritage, we can make sure that there's someone in attendance. But we would like to know in advance, a call from the chair or exactly what the need is and what they'll be asked to contribute. That would be most helpful.
Other questions from council? All right, I need a mover and a seconder for that. Councillor Drew, moved by Councillor Drew, seconded by Councillor Back. All those in favor? Carried. Next is the School Environmental Advisory Committee. Councillor Drew.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, before I do this properly, Councillor Drew, you're moving the recommendation?
Sure.
And a seconder by Councillor Kett. Go ahead.
The recommendation is to endorse, the recommendation is to endorse. I actually wanted to, looking at page 56, the excess soil management regulatory proposal. So there was some correspondence, and that a model use bylaw in reference to financial insurances be added to the proposal. I'm not clear what all this is about, and I just, would hesitate to endorse something. I would just ask that it be referred to council, to staff, sorry.
You wanted to make the change to be referred to staff,
Yeah,
just to get
refer to
clarification, refer to staff on what that
The
entails?
recommendation on page 56.
Right, 56. Councillor Kett, you're the seconder of that motion, and to accept that as a friendly amendment, to have it referred to staff so there can be more clarification on what that entails? Okay, refer to staff, okay. Any other questions from council? All right, seeing none, all those in favor? Carried. Any other, next is my pecuniary interest.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I have a mover for this, please?
Which one is it?
It's the Scugog Accessibility Advisory Committee minutes from May 31st, moved by Councillor Drew, seconded by Councillor Kett. Are there any questions on the minutes? All those in favor? Carried.
Thank you. The next item is we have a resurfacing Spring Boulevard, Comms 2018-46, 9.2.2. Councillor Back, are you moving the recommendation? Okay, I need a seconder for that. Councillor Guido. Councillor Back, you pulled it?
Yes, through the mayor, I just wanted to know, actually, not with this particular one, is this, well, I guess, is this coming to council because it's over budget? Is that why it's coming for approval?
Director Coleman?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor, no, it's well, I guess partially yes. Our procurement bylaw has two parts. One, that anything over 25,000, the contract award comes to council, and so this is 258,000. So that's one of the reasons it's coming to council, and the other reason is it is over budget. So for both those reasons.
Okay, because my question is, you know, we're getting to summer recess. I'm assuming and I'm hoping that Old Scugog Road between, oh my gosh, Old Simcoe Road by 8th to Edinburgh is to be paved this summer, and I just don't want to have that it needs council approval to go ahead, because this is now the time where it should be done during summer. So that's my question, is that one going to need approval by council as well, or will, because it's in budget, just go ahead?
I was going to say the delegation. Go ahead, Director Coleman. I'd rather you get the exact answer.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor, I don't remember exactly what, we have a recess delegation of authority. There's a report that the clerk brought through last meeting, or the one before that, and it gives staff, so if it's within budget or close to being within budget, staff can award it and just report to council at the first meeting in September, so it can still proceed during the summer because of that.
Do we know where that is, that process? Because this is sort of your little cushion of time when when the school's out, to get that done.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the councillor, it has not gone to tender yet. I believe the tender is just about ready to go out, so it will be tight to get it completed before school, but we will do our best to do that.
Okay, and I hope it doesn't have, I will be available if there's a special council meeting, because that road needs to get done. So that's just worried me when I saw that it had to get council approval, so thank you.
Okay, other Councilor Guido?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Pending a positive vote on this report, when can construction begin on that Spring Boulevard?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor, I believe it will start in late July or early August, the construction.
And do you know approximately how long the road will be under construction for?
I don't know the exact time frame. I would guess 4 to 6 weeks.
Okay, perfect.
Well,
Thank
once
you.
we award to the contractor, we will ask him for a schedule, and then we'll have more information on that.
Wonderful, thank you.
Just on further to that, the drainage, or would Miller be doing the drainage, or township staff? Like if there's extra ditches that have to be dug out?
Mr. Mayor, this time we have included the drainage, clearing out the tree stumps and ditching as part of the contract, which is part of the reason why the price is a little bit higher than we had anticipated.
Okay, so I just didn't know if that reference there to the communication of the residents on what to expect, because it's better to manage expectations if, say, they have a smaller ditch in front of their place, but for drainage it has to be increased, or change of rise in it, et cetera. So I just want to make sure that, as referenced in the report, that the communication is very open to the residents, and they manage the expectations so that they don't get complaints on what we've had in the before, that, you know, it's harder to cut the ditch or something like that. So, any other questions on this report from council? Seeing none, all those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Next item is the 9.2.3 Paxton Street bylaw, pulled by Councillor Back. Councillor Back, you moving the recommendation?
Yes, please.
Okay, seconded for that. Councillor Drew, sorry. Okay, go ahead.
Great,
Sorry,
thank you. Through the mayor to Director Coleman. So when this gets approved, if it gets approved tonight, will the 40-kilometer signs be put for the distance required by the Highway Traffic Act? Because I know there are residents on that street that really want those signs, the very specific distances apart, especially going west off of Simcoe entering. A lot of people just gun it up that hill, and you can't, there's no 40-kilometer sign there when you're just entering, or where it is not very effective. So will those signs be moved around to satisfy the residents?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor, yes, I have the email from one resident in particular that's been emailing about that. And I've identified one more location where a sign would be appropriate. The other direction, it wouldn't make sense to put it exactly to the Highway Traffic Act distances, but I would recommend one more sign along there.
Okay, appreciate it, thank you.
Okay, any other questions on that report? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor? Carried. And just because we have a related bylaw, 4718, look for a mover and seconder for the actual bylaw. Same mover, same seconder. Councillor Back? Councillor Drew? All right, questions on the bylaw? Seeing none, all those in favor? Carried. Back to the 9.2.4, the old mill lease. Councillor Back, you pulling it? Are you moving the recommendation? Yes, Councillor Guido?
Apologize, this is not one of the items Councillor
right.
Somerville wanted us to hold off.
Yep, Councillor Somerville has asked this to be pulled, and I said that I would honor that. So Councillor, this one will be deferred until later on in the consent agenda as well, later on in the agenda. And same with the bylaw enforcement vehicle. And then Councillor Back, it's the, my apologies, 9.2.8, which is the animal control services, and also we'll do the bylaw right afterwards. Councillor Back, are you moving the recommendation? Did you say yes, you are moving the recommendation?
Yes, I said
Okay,
yes.
I need a seconder for that. Councillor Guido, Councillor Back?
Thank you. Through the mayor, on page 114, where under discussion, it says Uxbridge will invoice Scugog for capital expenditures. Uxbridge will invoice Scugog for operating expenditures. I'm assuming that this is 50% of capital and of operating. Is that correct?
That's correct, Director Heritage?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor, yes, that's correct. It's 50-50 for both capital and operating.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, any other questions on the Animal Control Services Shelter Agreement? All right, seeing none, all those in favor? Carried. And also the relating bylaw, 5218, same mover, same seconder. Councillor Back, Councillor Guido? Okay, questions on the bylaw? Seeing none, all those in favor? Carried. Next is the 9.2.10, the sign variance. And Councillor Back, you're pulling that, you're moving it as recommended. And the seconder for that, Councillor Kett. Councillor Back?
Thank you. So I guess my first question is, what's the difference from this versus the Rona sign from a few years back, and by few years back, 5 or 6 years? Do you recall that, when they wanted a digital sign and that was absolutely not allowed? And we have a sign bylaw, new sign bylaw, with regards to the town being more of a heritage flavor to not have these. So what's the difference? I would think this is more digital versus what Rona has now. Is it not? Hi.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor. My understanding is that Rona has a digital sign. It's more of a readograph sign. The sign that's being proposed on this site will be a video display sign. It's not true moving video. It's more still pictures that will move in and out.
But if I recall, is that not what Rona wanted initially, and they weren't allowed? Do you recall this? It's not our term of council that this happened on.
I recollect seeing it, but that's exactly this purpose is the, I know questioning that video signage, et cetera, that whole bucket of types of signage was left so that it would have to come to council for sign variance applications just like this. Councillor Drew, did you have addition?
I believe when they wanted their sign, what was turned down was video. They wanted video.
And also there are restrictions to video on provincial highways. MTO, I believe, has 180, it has to be static, and there's all these extra rules on a provincial highway, so I don't know, because we weren't part of that application, but right now they have the readograph sign and...
Okay, so, I mean, I understand the reason for this sign, but I also understand that there's going to be a lot of possible blowback from this with regards to area residents. I appreciate that the sign will not be illuminated on typical sleeping hours, but another concern is this may be the start of many to come, and in Uxbridge, it was not well received as well, their own township sign. So what is this going to be the start of? Is this the startup of many? If we allow this one, how do you say no to another? You know, that sign bylaw, and I was part of that with the Heritage Subcommittee putting that together, was put in for a very specific reason for the flavor of the town. And if I understand the reason to modernize, but at the same time, that sign bylaw was put in to respect the heritage flavor of the town. So how do we say yes to this and no to others?
Ms. Stevenson?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bach. I guess that's going to be something that council is going to have to determine. Our recommendation was that each request be looked at for its merit, and one way of potentially addressing that concern of overrun would be to put a limit on how many the town would permit within its boundaries, within the municipality itself. I know that was initially put forward with respect to billboard signs, but that's a way that you can limit it and still support your local businesses. By placing restrictions and conditions on each individual sign, we can limit potential issues with, as we spoke with residents, but you can also limit size. There are many limits that you can put on in order to keep the flavor that you're looking for and still support the local businesses as much as we determine we can.
So does that mean that we're going to have staff revisit the sign bylaw and put some more detail into this? Because otherwise we're going to end up flashy everywhere. I understand the Medical Associates has so many different services in it, and I can understand the positive benefits of it, but we have to be very careful that we're not going to look like Las Vegas, so to speak, and have flashing video signs everywhere and anywhere throughout the town. It will just be a disaster.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bach. Again, all of those limitations are available within our conditions. When we discussed conditions with the Medical Association, we talked about the minimum time that a display could come up, the maximum time for turnaround, that there is no special effects. So you can really limit the whole flashy and still give them the opportunity to advertise, other than the ability, like a slideshow, to change the sign on a regular basis. I don't see it as being a large difference as a picture on the screen, a painted sign, the difference being that it just changes, and you can limit how much that changes. All those conditions can be put in. That's why we've proposed that each request, instead of changing the bylaw, it has to be by variance, and each request is looked on individually based on its own merits.
Now, if this gets installed and area residents are affected adversely, be it the time it comes on in the morning or the time that it shuts down, will bylaw or the township be prepared to request from the medical associates to maybe wane the hours a little bit if it is affecting people?
We can look at putting discussions in place and conditions in place, even with respect to time of year and based on any potential complaints that may come in.
Right, okay, because as you know, there's going to be quite a lot of new homes right across the street from that, and you know, even people that are shift workers. I don't know if during the day you're going to see that much, but you never know until it's there. So I hope that there's some flexibility there, that people don't have to endure something that they weren't expecting.
We can look at it further and address any of those potential concerns based on specific lighting levels. So we can talk about keeping the actual luminance down to a lower level.
And just, Councillor, back to add to that, because I've seen the programming for these before, and we used to have a readergraph sign one of my locations, and you can control that, the offset, winter offset, so it doesn't go as bright when it's going to be darker sooner. So I think that we have all those controls in place. I don't think any of us want a Las Vegas strip, as you mentioned, but I also do want to make sure we support the businesses in the town, and the Heritage Conservation District would have its own separate, more conservative rules versus the other areas. So I was very pleased to see the report and all the considerations that were put in there. So other questions from this, Councillor Drew?
I wanted it pulled too, and I had much of the same concerns about the new houses that are going across the street, and looking at the picture on whatever page that is. Can't see what page it is, but anyway, the picture there, it looks like it would be viewed from the people across the street. However, I am encouraged to see that the sign is not illuminated between 8 p.m. and 7 a.m., and I'm also encouraged when you say that can be adjusted, because in the winter hours, it's dark at 5, so, you know, that may be adjusted, and the illumination too. I'm happy with it now, so thank you very much.
Any other questions from council? Seeing none. Okay, great. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Next item is the 9.2.13, the procurement bylaw. Councillor Back, are you moving it as recommended? Did you say yes? Sorry, I was looking now. Yep. Seconder for that, Councillor Guido. Councillor Back?
Thank you. Through the mayor. On page 147, the council approval of what is existing as needing council approval of more than 25,000 and wanting it to change to 50,000.
Sorry, what page did you reference?
That's on page 147.
No, it must be
3 of 5.
157 maybe?
147?
151.
Okay, on mine it's 147, so I've got the old version.
That's not the amended one, yeah. Okay, page 151 on the
Sorry,
one.
this will be fun. Okay, so, council approval. I still think that 25,000 is a good mark. The 50,000 makes me a little nervous.
Director Coleman, Director Valentin, did you want to make a comment or a reason why that was suggested increase?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. With the increasing in contract values, this procurement bylaw has been in place since 2007. With escalating costs and things, it just seemed, in looking at our comparative municipalities, it just seemed like a better value. By coming back to council with the frequency of our meetings and the timing, sometimes it inhibits staff to actually proceed with the project. What we're proposing here are, these are items that have already received council approval, so these have received budget approval. So it's just, Director Coleman had mentioned, she brought the Spring Boulevard report forward. So anything over $25,000 currently needs to come and get approval from council before it can proceed. By this new procurement, it's still things that are within their budget, but anything over $50,000. So it's just to increase the limits that, that need to come and get council approval.
So for instance, this one Spring, would it be referring to Spring Boulevard as well, or is it when you're actually purchasing an item?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So Spring Boulevard, because it's over 200,000, would come regardless, because it's over the 50. Where we found instances are our vehicles. So our vehicles are around that $25,000 to $30,000. They've already received council approval through the budget. Some of the instances we've come across this year is by the time it came to council, it was such a lead time, the vehicles are actually gone because we can't commit and we can't put deposits on them. So we've missed out on that opportunity. And then we have to go out again and then get another approval from council. It just delays the whole process.
Okay, but I have an issue if I don't have an issue if it's an item that's already approved in the budget by council for a threshold of X amount of dollars. Go ahead, purchase that. But when it's something then that is over set approved budget in the excess of this amount, that really makes me nervous, because it almost throws the budget process to the wind, so to speak, that we approve something for $100,000 and yet it gets purchased at $150 or $100, that really makes me nervous. If it's within an approved budget, that's fine, but I don't think that's how I'm reading it here.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It has to be within the approved budget. If it's over budget, a penny, it comes to council for approval. So council, as the treasurer has mentioned, would have approved the amount in the budget, and if it's within that budget and it's less than, $50,000, it could be awarded, but not over budget. If it's over budgeted, it comes to council.
And if it's non-budgeted items,
Comes to council.
Is it still to council regardless?
Yes.
Okay, and on my page 159, I don't know which one yours will be, on contingencies, 11.2, where it says the chief administrative officer may authorize any expenditure under section 11.1 above.
Page 163.
Yeah. So can you explain that to me?
Contingencies 11.2.
11.1 and 11.2
on page 163.
on whatever page it is.
Mr. Mayor, I can answer that. So the contingency is based on, so when you have an award that goes through, there are items that perhaps you don't take into consideration. So what we're providing here is that when the award comes through, that staff have the ability to award up to 15% contingency as long as it's within budget. However, if there are other issues that we think may come up, that the CAO can approve a contingency greater than that, but it still needs to be within the budget. If anything goes over budget, it needs to come back for council approval.
Okay.
So contingency can be used for things like additional meetings, public meetings that would be required, or on a construction project, if you come across excessive water and you need to de-water, things like that, that kind of are out of the ordinary that you don't anticipate when you award it. And if you, so typically it'd be about 15% of the contract value, but if you do expect that there could be something more, and that would be on a case-by-case basis, then additional approvals from the CEO would be required.
And so this is just not to drag it out that you lose a project?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. It's to cover those unanticipated expenses, but still within budget. In some projects, because as the treasurer said, we might know that there are soil issues or water issues, and that might merit a 17 or 18% contingency, rather than the 15, so it provides that flexibility.
But still
Normally-
within the budget, though.
Still within the
Okay.
budget.
And then turning to the next page, 12.3, and this goes to with what I brought up, I think it was the last meeting, where it states, Director of Finance and the Chief Administrative Officer may jointly authorize the purchase of goods, services, etc. Can that also include mayor, deputy mayor? At least that way, there's some member of council, ownership, so to speak.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So this is not for new, this is for additional goods on an existing contract. So similarly, if within the threshold, we've awarded it, say, if you approve the $50,000 limit, for instance, if it is, say, an award of $45,000, it wouldn't come to council, but then there's still, say, $10,000 worth of budget, we can approve additional goods and services up to the budget amount. So it still wouldn't come back to council necessarily.
Okay, and on my page 161, I'm thinking maybe it's 164 for you, 14.11.
165.
For council recess periods. Now, for that, to issue awards and tenders, can that also not have, where it has CAO, Director of Finance, Mayor or Deputy Mayor, or Acting Mayor as well? So this would be, I guess, in a situation where it's summer break, Old Simcoe Road comes forth to get it approved. I'm assuming that's what this is, to authorize?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So, yeah, this would be during council recess period, so if it's within the budget and within, then it, so 14.1.1 designates the CAO and Director of Finance, myself, and 14.1.2 is similar to our delegation of authority bylaw, where it be the mayor, deputy mayor, and the CEO or Director of Finance to award issues that exceed the budget or unbudgeted. So 14.1.1 is just for the awards that have already been within budget.
Okay, so on budget, and if they're off, then the deputy mayor, that would be the additional, so it doesn't slow it down?
Right.
Perfect.
Correct.
Sorry, there's this, let me just make sure. I think that's it.
Councillor Drew?
I just wanted to point out that we actually had that happen a few months ago, where we lost the ability to purchase a couple of trucks, pickup trucks, because of the delay and the trucks were gone. So this would speed up things and save us some money too.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions on this? Seeing none, already moved, recommendation and seconded. All those in favor? Carried. Need a mover and seconder for bylaw 5118 that's related to this one. Moved by Councillor Drew, seconded by Councillor Guido. Any questions on the bylaw? Seeing none, all those in favor? Carried. Next up is 9.2.16, the regional report, which is pulled by Councillor Back. I already have it moved by Councillor Drew. Councillor Back, are you seconding that report? Sure.
Okay.
Councillor Back, you pulled it?
Thank you. Through the mayor, first off, I have a question for a regional councillor. So we just had the repavement from Reach to Castle Harbour. I have a question with regards to why the turning lane to turn into Castle Harbour was removed. It's a solid white line. Residents had actually called while this was in process and requested even a longer, wider turning lane into that subdivision because people ride up the back of you, and especially in the snow, it's very difficult to turn on that corner, and right now there is no turning lane. So are they planning to, they just did the markings on the road, and are they going to give us a turning lane, or are we in?
Oh, Councilor Drew, you want to answer, or Director Coleman have input on it?
Can you answer, Director Coleman? If I'd known beforehand, I could have checked with staff to find out, but I don't have that answer off the top of my head, so.
May I request?
Do I get that answer and provide it to you?
Okay, because I'm going to have a lot of people, including myself, which want a turning lane. Secondly, it's to both our regional representatives. I scratched my head on this as well, and I've had a lot of people asking me this. Why the road from Reach to Castle Harbor? It's beautiful. I forgot what it's like to drive on smooth pavement. However, we're going to have major earthworks being done with regards to Canterbury Common coming out from Country Estates on to Simcoe and on to Coulter. Why would we not have delayed this lovely project until that was completed? Because the amount of trucks that are there are going to tear what is a lovely road right now.
Director Coleman or Director Heritage might be able to answer the traffic patterns that are expected during that construction. And also, again, if I'd known beforehand, I would have asked that question. But however, I think this has been on the schedule for a number of years to do this, and then it came up. So I believe Castle Harbor has not come forward with their site plan agreements, or have they?
It's not Castle Harbor, it's the earthworks that are going to be done at Country Estates, which is Canterbury Common, which did come to this council, and we are well aware of it, and that's why I'm just wondering why that project at the region wasn't saying, thank you for putting it in the 2018 budget, but if you want to bump it to 2019 or 20, because it's a waste to see that amount of trucks that are going to wreck brand-new paved road, and a lot of people are questioning that.
Director Coleman, I don't know if you had any input to that. I don't know if you had any.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the councillor, I don't have too much to add. We have told the region what our schedule is with that work. They have their own scheduling issues, and we can't control when they do things. I do know our new road with, proper base and proper asphalt will withstand a lot of truck traffic, so it won't necessarily be all beat up because of that. It may be able to withstand that traffic.
Is there not a security deposit that the developers have to do if there is any damage to the roads that is done? I mean, it would be the region that would be looking for that.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that is typically part of what we would take for a site alteration agreement is a security deposit for our roads, and we can offer, like, the region to take a security as well.
And I just know from being at the region, like Councillor Back, you referenced why this isn't, the reports are massive, and the control on exactly what Director Coleman has stated is the not everything comes to council. There's only certain thresholds, or they might be in a CD that's provided with thousands of pages on there, and you do searches and you try and find everything that's pertaining to the municipality. But even like to get detouring routes for when that construction was happening and trying to get trucks detoured on the regional road construction to get them detour out to Highway 12, it's like it's not an easy task to do. And even though you bring it up to them and you have that done, they have set processes that they deal with, and unfortunately we don't have the voice with only a couple councillors there and to be able to get them to understand our issues, because they have their own set processes that it's very hard, as we've seen with many of the things, to make sense of it to change down there. So there is a strong voice that we are definitely trying to make sure there are issues of concern. And generally I could say that they are very accommodating with the staff, and what I can think of many issues, whether it's to deal with the water tower or the extra communication towers in Canterbury Common. They're very accommodating to try and do it, but when it comes to the tendering process and things are already moving this way, it's difficult to stop this movement of a large process there. So I don't know if Councillor Drew, if you had anything to add to that.
Just to reiterate what Director Coleman had said, that Simcoe Street is a major traffic route, and it is meant and it is built for heavy truck traffic, because it is it goes all the way up to wherever, Highway 48, and right down to the lake. So it's a heavy traffic area. It is built for heavy trucks, and it's much different procedure than your average subdivision roads.
Councillor Back?
Thank you, through the mayor. It's my understanding, though, that because Simcoe goes into an urban downtown sort of area, that those heavy trucks actually technically, especially ones that are the double axle, are not supposed to be on Simcoe. They're supposed to be on 12 to 7 to 57, which is another issue entirely. However, it bugged me, and it bugged a lot of people to see a road really that wasn't in poor condition. Grateful to have smooth traffic, or a smooth road. As I said, I don't know what it's like to drive on smooth pavement anymore, but it was not a tear-apart road to begin with. To see all that money being spent on a lovely new road, which will take some beating with the amount of earthworks that are going to go on with Canterbury Common, I just scratch my head to say, and I'm not blaming staff on this at all. I'm saying, within a budget, two representatives looking at two different budgets, or what's going on in the community and what's going on in the region. I really wish that this would have been pushed to 2019 or 20 to enjoy that road a little bit longer.
And Councillor Back, you're referencing that we have this ability, if you attended one of the long regional meetings that deal with all these items that are on there, you'll see that it's not as easy as just bumping like we can do here. We're smaller, we're more nimble. You risk bumping something that it doesn't come back on there, or it gets bumped and bumped continually. There's a lot of things that are on the regional long-term capital plan that get bumped for other reasons, whether it's St. Field Road, for example, with the bridges that are required, or Shirley Road with the S-band. There's a lot of roads that need to be dealt with in funds, and I don't disagree. We need to welcome those funds that are here, but it's not our municipal road here for our local municipality, for our staff to be dealing with, but the road, and I can only say that developer would be responsible for it if they were to damage it, but it would be highly unlikely that the truck traffic that they're doing, because consider how many trucks go on that road on a daily basis. I would welcome it if the trucks would all use Highway 12 instead of that, but it's a regional network. It connects municipalities, and trucks are allowed to drive on that road, so. Having said that, is there any other comments on the regional report? Any other? I'm seeing none. All those in favor? Carried. Next up is Councillor Somerville is here. So are you, want me to go on to the next report while you get settled, or? Okay, so we'll go back to the old mill lease, item 9.2.4. Councillor Back, Councillor Somerville, you've pulled it. Are you moving the recommendation? The old mill lease. So are you moving anything with this? Councillor Kett? Moving it? Councillor Guido seconding it? Okay. Councillor Somerville, do you want me to go to Councillor Back while you get settled? Councillor Back? Pardon me? Anybody else want to speak to it? All right. Councillor Somerville, you?
Thank you.
Okay, so I've got Councillor Somerville, Councillor Back, Councillor Guido, yeah, we have moved and seconded, Councillor Kett and Councillor Guido. So, Councillor Somerville, are you ready now?
My apology for being late. My granddaughter's graduation, from grade 8. We are on, I hope, the old mill, right? Okay.
Yes, I do have some questions. Number one question is, what is going to be actually stored in this building?
I'm trying to see, yeah, sure.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, what's going to be stored are empty beer cans before they're filled, of course, for the Old Flame Brewery. And there will be no occupancy of people in that building, other than just to drop off and pick up.
Okay, sorry, I'm just still kind of at lost here. What about the fire safety part of it all? I'm kind of concerned about this. I know that there won't be any tenants in the building, but the fire safety part of it all, because we now have a tenant in the building, what do you plan, what's the plans for the fire part?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, well, it's a non-combustible product. It's steel cans or aluminum cans, whatever they happen to be. We were more concerned about making sure the structural sufficiency of the space was adequate, and did refer to the Greer Galloway report, I know Council's familiar with, and that report required some bracing of the trusses in the garage portion of the old mill, the northern piece, and the lease calls for those structural improvements to be made to the trusses prior to occupancy. So we hadn't, we don't feel it's a fire risk. It is insured by the township, and then there's a requirement of the lease for the tenant to take out insurance as well.
Also, the Waterfront Advisory Committee is up tomorrow evening for their meeting. I feel uncomfortable about making any decisions on this when the Waterfront Advisory Committee is due. I think they have, they must do due diligence on this, and I would feel much better if it went to them. We just did that with the Fair Board when we were talking about the old church over and the fairgrounds. It went to the Fair Board first, and then it went to the Heritage, and then it came back to council. Why are we doing it this way around?
To you, Mr. Mayor, we did look at the mandate and purpose of both the Waterfront Committee and the Heritage Committee, and let's just review for a moment. We're talking about a short-term lease that does not affect the outside of the building, does not actually change the inside of the building, other than some repairs to trusses above the ceiling. So there's no physical changes to the building, and there's no occupancy of the building other than storage coming and going. So when you look at the mandate and purpose of the Waterfront Committee, their mandate is to deal with the redevelopment of the old mill building and the surrounding waterfront lands. Of course, you know, including the Latchman Center and including the southwest parking lot at Water Street and North Street. And then the purpose and mandate is about developing that Phase 2 waterfront plan. We don't see this short-term lease as falling within that purpose and mandate, and I'm not sure in an advisory role what they would advise council with respect to their mandate that council's directed them to work towards. The same applies to the Heritage purpose and mandate. They're not doing anything with respect to the building that would affect the heritage attributes or heritage character of the building. The only thing that's being done is a curb cut and some gravel put down so they won't rut up the grass, and the tenant's going to restore that to its original condition when they're finished. So with that in mind, we felt from staff perspective that this was a matter that should go to council, not to the advisory committees, and council would advise these advisory committees of the action they had taken. And again, that's because it's a short-term lease, and the occupancy and such didn't affect the purpose and mandate of those committees. in our opinion.
Yeah, but it's a short-term lease, but there's also the option to continue to rent that.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the lease that's before you does speak to a year's lease.
Yes, that's right.
And then after that time, it's month to month.
Correct.
However, I know that if that's a concern for council, I know that the proposed tenant would look at, you know, something more shorter, maybe a 6-month or month to month, if that is something council is concerned about. I think it's fairly obvious that with, you know, the upcoming election and a newly elected council coming, that we thought that there really wouldn't be, you know, nothing happening of substance that this lease would interfere with within the year's time. And that's why we supported the request. And I just want to tell you, this was a request that came through to staff, and we received it, I think, May the 30th, and we wanted to get it before council, before the summer recess. You know, staff had looked at this as an opportunity to recoup costs associated with the old mill. Where currently, the old mill's carrying costs are in the area of, well, in 2017, of about $22,000. And this funds could be put to offset those costs, or to look at, you know, some maintenance that's needed with respect to the building.
Well, I have some concerns about this. Another thing, too, is I'm quite concerned about the tenant bringing this, the trusses into repair, and I think, and not the municipality to bring the building up to standards after occupancy. I don't think that that's the tenant's place. I think that should be the municipality's place to bring this place up to standard, the trusses, as well as the old flame going in there. I don't think that they should. I think we should be doing that if we are going to do that, as all owners of buildings do. They don't expect their tenants to put the trusses in.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I think this is just an added benefit, is we know those trusses need to be reinforced.
Exactly.
The tenant is proposing to take on that cost, and that would flow through our building area, so we would inspect it to make sure it was done properly. In addition to that, the tenant would need to do that in accordance with the Gear Galloway report, which prescribes how those trusses are to be reinforced.
Well, I think we need to look into this further. I don't think that this is a good idea. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Councilor Guido?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I just confirm the $22,000 of carrying costs, that comes out of operating, and so that's directly from the taxpayers? So we have before us, oh, sorry, Diane nodded yes.
Yes. Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, that's correct.
Thank you. So we have before us a proposal to assist with offsetting the cost to operate the mill. I personally think it would be a foolish decision to not entertain some type of monetary reimbursement back to the municipalities, so that it lessens the amount of taxpayers' money going to operate a building. As far as utilities go, that would be the sole responsibility of the tenant to pay the utilities?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, that's correct.
Thank you. And I'm not sure if this is...
Through Mr. Mayor, the proportion of the utility cost for the oil mill based on the square footage of the occupied space.
Thank you. And just to confirm, there will be no signage or advertising of the proposed business?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct, nor any parking other than drop-off and pick-up.
Thank you. And when it's appropriate, I would be prepared to make a friendly amendment to the motion if it gets to that point. I believe what may be holding some reservation is the duration of the lease of a year. our term of council is coming to an end soon, and if we move to a more flexible, either month-to-month or 6 months with a 1 month after that, perhaps it will allow the opportunity for the municipality to have some revenue, but then when the waterfront committee does have any plans to present, and we know that's going to take a bit of time with public consultation, we'll have more flexibility should we need to request that the tenants are vacated. But I'm not sure if it's an appropriate moment right now when the rest of council hasn't asked their questions.
No, Councilor Guido, this is the appropriate time, and if Councilor Cat is the mover, accepts it as a friendly, then we can certainly take, you just gotta tell me, is it 6 months or month-to-month?
Mr. CAO, was the tenant, did he advise that he would be agreeable to a month-to-month?
To you, Mr. Mayor, he advised that he would be agreeable to 6 months, month-to-month, or, if there was concern, he would be agreeable to month-to-month.
So 6 months' time from now, actually today is Christmas Day, so will be when the new term of council is in place, and we'll have probably had a few council meetings under their belt, so I would make a friendly amendment that it's moved to a 6-month lease with month-to-month extension after that point.
Councilor Cat? Councilor Cat agrees to that, so...
That's fine.
All right, the amendment. All right, Councilor Guido, are you done talking? Okay.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you.
All right. Councilor Back?
Thank you. I have quite a few questions. I guess this would be to Councilor Heritage, Director Heritage. Has the building been brought to safety standards that were recommended in the engineering report with regards to the actual mill?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor. The report identified several recommendations as an unoccupied space, and then a number of recommendations as an occupied space. In terms of an unoccupied space in the old mill, yes, the bracing has been installed as required in the report, so it's up to snuff in terms of an unoccupied space. There are a number of improvements that are required if it's going to be used as an occupied space, the old mill. The flooring, the support structure, the roofing. And as Mr. Allure had indicated, on the garage area, the supporting trusses need to be put in place there.
So can you define to me occupancy? What is the difference between the public going in a building, if it's retail or if it's tourism, and staff going regularly in? To me, if a person's in a building, able to work in a building, that's occupancy in my world.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So, I think Mr. Heritage was trying to distinguish between the old mill building proper and then the north addition that's subject to this lease. So the old mill, I'll call it proper, the original old mill, is been reinforced so it's safe for an unoccupied space. And there's no occupancy intended for that space. The only occupancy that occurs from time to time is staff or committee members who are viewing that just in and out for heritage purpose, waterfront purpose, or some maintenance purpose by staff. That is something, the municipality takes on that risk just to do its duty and its job. But the public is not permitted to enter that building. The building to the north building with the garage, where the garage door is, only needs minor upgrades in the trusses to allow occupancy. Occupancy as an office or occupancy by people on a continuous basis would need more upgrades in terms of this space. It's really not habitable if you've been in there in terms of its condition. But for storage, our building department has looked at it and feel that it's suitable for storage. And the lease does indicate it's only for storage, and it's not for occupancy on a continual basis by any person. It's in and out.
But how do you police that?
Well, that's the terms of the lease, and if they were to commence to occupy that on a regular basis or on an intermittent basis by people, they would be in violation of the lease, and the lease would be terminated.
So above a portion of the part that is going to be leased is actually a part where there are grain bins. Has that part of the old mill been properly repaired as per the engineer report?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor, the engineer's report stated that there was sufficient support in there for building number 3 to accommodate occupancy.
And so these trusses that are going to be repaired or installed by the tenant, will they need a building permit?
Through the mayor, yes, we would issue a building permit so it gets proper inspection.
So there'll be proper inspection prior to any material or employees of the business going in?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. In fact, when staff were evaluating this request, we had our building inspector visit the site and both visit building 3 in the attic and building 4, which is the garage parent area, just to confirm that this was something that could be done, and he had knowledge of it, so we would expect him to do that inspection.
Okay. There's in the actual terms of the lease, and it's page 81 of mine, or 6, section 6, section actually 6.04, alterations to premises. It says, the tenant shall be permitted to make leasehold improvements as it requires, provided leasehold improvements are not of a nature to endanger the structure. What leasehold improvements would need to be had if it's just a storage warehouse in such a sort of hot topic building where we don't know if this is going to be kept or what its use going to be? I don't think that there should be any leasehold improvements by the tenant. It should just strictly be you're storing in an as-is basis with the exception of the trusses for safety. I don't think any leasehold improvements should be made to that building whatsoever.
Through the mayor, I would agree with that, and in fact, no leasehold improvements are proposed. And if leasehold improvements were to come forward, it does say that it requires the approval of the landlord, and we would not approve leasehold improvements.
Could we just not strike that from the actual lease? I think it's better to have it out than or to have that there is no leasehold improvements to be made to the structure. I think that would be better. Then it doesn't have to come to you.
Yes, through the mayor, this is, I think, more of a standard clause, and I don't believe, I know that there's no leasehold improvements being made or contemplated, so that could be worded that way.
Okay. So when you get to a month-to-month basis, is there going to be a demolition clause in this lease? And when I mean demolition clause, I mean it in the industry term, where it doesn't mean necessarily that you are demolishing said building. It's just a tool for the landlord to say, you've got 30 days on a demolition clause that we are going to be asking you to vacate. It's a little bit stronger for the landlord. It's in all mall leases. It's something I'm very familiar with.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if the tenant gets to the month-to-month basis, then we would give him a month's notice to vacate. That's how we've interpreted month-to-month. He has month-to-month, so we would give him a month's notice that we needed the space. Okay, and on page 80, I guess it's section 3.02, option to extend with regard to the rent. First off, I think the rent actually is quite low. I don't know how did this number get chosen. I did a little bit of background, and in 2011-12, that actual exact space, although it was commercial, and it still sort of is commercial, was $1,500 a month.
And if you were to go to just basic storage units, I had quotes today ranging from $1,483 to $3,427 a month for a similar comparable size, and that's strictly a storage unit, not commercial. I think $800 actually is quite low.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, well, as mentioned, this was a proposal brought forward to us from staff, and the offer was $800 a month, plus utilities, plus the repairs to the trusses, and we've just taken that offer forward to council and explained how it could offset some of our carrying costs.
Director Heritage, do you know roughly what the price of that repair would be?
I don't, through you, Mr. Mayor, I don't recall.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, when our building inspector visited the site, I asked him for an estimate of the cost. He said somewhere in the area of $2,500 to $3,000. It's lateral truss braces on the existing web trusses that are there.
Did you say?
$2,500 to $3,000.
Okay. I think the rent's too low. On Section 7, with regards to insurance, it has $2 million, and I understand that the building is already insured under the township, but any of our boards or any event that we have always has a standard $5 million. I'm wondering why this is only $2 million.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that is true. We typically ask for $5 million.
So may I ask that that's changed to $5 million, please? All right. I have it just a few more.
No, I want to make sure we're...
Oh,
capturing
my
this because-
page 82.
No, I want to make sure that, we've already dealt with the 6 month, but, no leasehold improvements and the, $5 million coverage, so friendly amendment accepted, Councilor Kett, Councilor Guido? Yes, okay, just want to make sure we capture that.
Okay, I'm almost done. Section 9.01, right, and actually, can I backtrack just for a minute with regards to the rent? I'm sorry. Where it states when it gets to a month-to-month, and now I'm back to page 80, month-to-month, relevant, where is it? That the basic rent shall be determined, if not agreed by both parties to go to arbitration. Why is there not just a standard rent schedule? This is what it is. We didn't go to market to look for a tenant. This is being requested by us and appreciated in a sense that we will get revenue from the tenant for the old mill. However, the landlord should be in the driving seat here and have a standard rent schedule. This is what it is, sort of take it or leave it. I don't think that we should be going to arbitration to what the rent is. That's very odd. Can we take that out, please? I don't like that arbitration.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through to council. That was a standard clause within the lease agreement that was sent to us by our legal department. So that's just something to have. If you would like to remove it, it is something that was approved by our legal review.
I would remove it. I just have a standard rent schedule.
So,
Pardon me? Oh, section 3.02.
3.02.
Option to extend. It's the last sentence of the last paragraph of that, of the Arbitration Act.
So I'm just looking at the mover and seconder for that, and I just might want to add that also our legal just does a final review of any of these changes for if there's a separate legal reason for them being in there, but,
I just find it very odd. I've never seen that in my life. I wish I had an ability to go to arbitration for rent. So 9.01, right of entry. I really think that the township should have a key to the building, and in a sense, not to snoop around or anything, and not that they would, but usually landlords have a key in case of emergency, because it states, you know, if there's an emergency, you know, you have to agreed upon time by the tenant to go in. I think it's more prudent that the township CBO perhaps, or the clerk has that key, and if there is an emergency, that they're able to get into that building for whatever purpose and then vacate the building and lock it again. I don't think that you should have to wait for a tenant on your own building.
I'm just going to ask Chief Burney, Director of Emergency and Fire Services, is it common for, I know there's making sure that the fire department has access and keys to certain buildings, is this one where there might be a situation where there's, for emergency purposes only, that the fire department, or do you guys try and stay away from having keys?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Mayor. What we normally do with occupancies of interest, if I may call them that, is we negotiate with the landlord and/or the tenant to put a key safe box on the building. And that key safe box would traditionally give us access throughout the building through the use of the keys that are stored in that box, and then we have a master key to get into that lock box.
So then I think this needs to be changed, the wording in here.
So what's paragraph 9.02?
It's the first paragraph, 9.01. Let me just find it.
Yeah, so it's, currently it says to enter the premises during normal business hours for the purpose of inspecting, same prior notice, so it's more after hours, and that's what, referring to the emergency, that if it can be to the satisfactory of the Director of Emergency Services.
So do you read it, Mr. CAO, that they're allowed to enter using those keys? Is that how it reads to you?
Yeah, because it references in paragraphs, except in an emergency where no notice shall be required. So if it's normal practice because there's an interest for the township to have that, then we can just give that as direction to the fire services to pursue that.
I've got two more.
Oh, just a second, Councillor Back, did you have a comment? Chief Burney?
I would put caution towards putting keys in the key safe box for the purpose of, other than emergency, to gain access into that building.
Oh, I'm only stating for emergency purposes. For instance, in a mall, the control center has every key to every store in the mall, and they only go on an emergency basis. Section 12.07, assignment and subletting. I don't understand why this is here. The tenant shall not assign this lease or sublet all or any portion of the premises without the prior written consent of the landlord. I think that needs to be scrapped. You have one tenant, you don't need to have an issue. This is obviously a warehouse storing situation. You don't need to be having sublet, again, having to go to the CAO for permission. I think this lease is with the sole tenant.
Okay, so 12.07, no subletting allowed is your...
Yeah.
So, Councillor, it's been accepted, amendment, no subletting permitted on 12.07.
Okay, and two more. Has the health department been contacted? Because if these are empty cases of cans that will be filled in the future, that's a consumable, and that needs health department, I would think, health department inspection of the area and approval prior to this even going ahead. When you're dealing with food or drinks, consumables, the area needs to be inspected by the health department.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think in that regard, that's the obligation of the tenant with the health to make sure that he can store those items there. I have not heard any concerns from him in that regard, so
Okay, well, just prior to our tenant going ahead with any investment in truss repair, I would strongly urge that you go and speak to the health department first and see if everything's okay, because if they don't give you a green light and you started repairs, that's not a good situation. And lastly, I just also have to voice my concern about this not coming to the waterfront committee. This is the third time that a decision has come directly to council pertaining to the mill without any consideration or comment from the waterfront. You know, I use it akin to the housing plan. That was vetted and commented on by the housing committee, and even before it came to us. And I know a lot of people on that committee are very hardworking, dedicated, passionate people, and they're really getting upset about this. And this, to me, is one of the most important committees we have. The future of the waterfront needs to be a public process, and public involvement, and I really would have preferred that this went through that committee just to vet some questions and then brought to council. I don't see what the rush was. So I just needed to note that, because there's several very unhappy people on that committee, and we're just gaining ground on the old mill. So I agree month to month, but we're just getting our footing and getting that building ideas for it. And to have a tenant in there, especially if you have a long-term, it handcuffs you.
So, Councillor Back, I want to, make sure it's loud and clear that we appreciate the committee members and the volunteer of their time, and as you heard the CAO start off with the fact that this didn't align with the mandate of the committee, and it was a decision to bring it to council because it's ultimately council. Same with the committee decisions, it's ultimately the council's decision, and to add other steps to this when it's not affecting it. It was a concern that I had when it came up there, is to make sure that it didn't impede or hinder any of the decisions that the waterfront Phase 2 committee, redevelopment for Phase 2 is working on, because I know there's a lot of time and effort and hard work going into that, and by no means did I want to see that hindered. So I think that it's short-term, and it doesn't affect it. We know we're going into summer recess and then into election time period, so I think this bridges that one, and I would have a hard time not supporting something where we're going to have some extra funds to help offset the cost, because in the public realm, there's a lot of people that support the preservation of the heritage of the mill, and there's a lot of people that don't. So I think for the people that want us to do everything within our power that's not going to hinder the future preservation of that heritage, but also to subsidize the carrying costs of that, I think that is prudent, and it's fiscally responsible for us, understanding that the Waterfront Phase 2 Committee has a mandate that's very broad and a lot of property there, very key piece to our municipality. So I don't want them to feel slighted or they're not appreciated. They absolutely are, and I know that this process involved a lot of vetting and due diligence, and this is why it's here today, is so that we can discuss it just as we are. And then there's also liaisons from this committee. I know the chair of the committee is here tonight, and I also know that the members that are liaisons from our council will also help communicate this for when there are questions. And remember, I want to remind the committee members who are council liaisons that their role is not only to help clarify stuff back at council, but when you're at these committee meetings, to help communicate what is happening at the council level and to help steer it. It's not just staff's responsibility if they're there, it's also council is privy to all these council agendas where the committee members may not be up to speed. So I really would hope that the liaisons from council will continue to help clarify any issues that come up, and it's not just a staff responsibility. So, Councillor Drew, you're next up.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't have any further questions, but I want to thank staff and the proposed tenant for bringing this forward in a timely fashion so that we could deal with this over the summer. So, yes, I fully support the recommendations here. Why would we not, on a short-term lease, have some revenue to offset the expenses that are at the taxpayers' expense, and also as a bonus to have some of the repair work done, the structural repair work done. So, thanks again to everybody. I fully support.
Any final comments from council on this one? Councilor Kett?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I do, and I'll say why I don't support this. Number one is, we're looking at $6.85 gross rent, which is extremely low. I just wonder who got the comparables for that and where the price came up.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think I've already provided the answer to that we had a proposal submitted and brought it to council for consideration. There were no comparables done.
So you just brought okay, fair enough. To Director Heritage, what were, in the Galloway report, what were the costs to repair units 3 and 4?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councilor, I don't have the specific figures for each of the units. I know the total figure was well over $500,000 just for the internal improvements.
I understand what it was altogether, but what were they for just the 2 units that they're in? Because I was under the impression it was a lot more than $2,500.
I don't have those figures with me at this point in time.
Now, the CAO mentioned that there's going to be 1 month termination. In that termination, will we have a clause that states that the tenant shall have no further rights after said notice of termination?
Just give me a moment, I'd like to look and see what the lease currently says in that regard. Yeah, it currently says the tenant shall have no further option to extend the amount of the basic rent to be paid during the... So it kind of says that now, if you'd like that reinforced a bit.
So my point isn't for options, my point is for occupancy. No further right to occupancy.
Could you just expand what you mean there, because I want to make sure it's captured clearly? Occupancy,
Well, I'll give an example.
More than storage?
When I did leases, I would always put, if there was a demolition clause or whatever in the lease, I would say that I would have the first right of refusal to go back to re-rent in the new retail location. So, that just happens to be that I was in retail. So my question is about the right after, or survivorship of the lease, okay? And there's another clause in there that says something about movement if the tenant moves. Movement into the building.
Do you have the reference for that?
No, I don't have it. It just has the rent will be increased by the, that meant pro rata share.
Mr. Mayor, I'd just like to be clear on, what the addition that Councilor Kett would like added. 301 talks about the term and when it would end. And I guess at the end of the lease, they would vacate the space. They're no longer leasing the space. But you're looking for some additional safeguard there, Councilor Kett? I just want to make sure we have the proper wording so we can add what's being requested.
No, I'm looking right now for the movement. Where's that?
4.3.
Yes, okay, yes, exactly. 4.3, thank you.
4.03?
03.
So what are you referring to, that it's found, saying that the landlord acknowledges the basic rent has been calculated based on the tenant occupying approximately 1,430 square feet of rentable area of the building? If the tenant is found to be using more than 1,430 square feet within the building, then the basic rent shall be adjusted accordingly. So are you saying that there should be no expansion of that?
There should be no mention of the tenant found occupying more, because definitely we don't want anybody moving into other space in the building.
So you're asking for
removal of last sentence.
Yeah. Okay. So removal of the last sentence, seconder? Okay.
And I guess my main thing is I guess with the rent that they're requesting to pay, still as a gross rent, it's very, very inexpensive. I mean, that would barely pay for the expenses of a normal building. I mean, we're giving the taxes, we're giving the insurance, and we're giving the maintenance, the exterior maintenance for it. So it's a gross rental.
So,
well, I mean, before, 4 or 5 years ago, they were paying $1,285 gross, and now they're paying $685, or the request. I realize it's not comparables, but...
It's not occupied, and the tenant's taking on risk by doing the embracing that's required, and it's a month-to-month. It's really hard to get somebody to move into a spot with a month-to-month that they could be ousted. I would, knowing that I certainly wouldn't want to have a business in there where I don't have control over how long it's going to be, but the proposed tenant understands the circumstances around it, knows. So it's temporary in nature, and I think everything reflects that. I think if, the amount of time that would be lost in going out and getting that could be, calculated as part of having a lease 3 or 4 months before then. So I really think that we can kick this around for a long time, but there's an opportunity, and I would really, my personal view is that I want to be able to stand up in front of the public and say there's an opportunity to capture some of the costs, subsidize the cost of the mill being there, and the support of this council making the resolution for that to stay and go through the process and continue on with that. We've made it clear that we want to preserve the heritage value of that, and it comes with a cost that I want to make sure that I'm supporting on having funds come in, and if we find out later on this is a really long-term project, well then, things could be changed then, because we're on a month-to-month lease.
And I guess the last thing is, who's the one who wants to tell John Mackey that he can't have it? Because he requested it over a year ago for the Zamboni storage and to do the arena or the rink on the lake and the public skating for more of a community service.
Yeah, I think it's down to the financial part of it, right? I don't think there was any cost associated with the use of that. So, no, I understand what you're saying, but it's this council's prerogative. So, you have any more?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Councilor Drew? Sorry.
Thanks. I just would like to say, it sounds like there may be some opposition to this, and the alternative is we don't get any income. This is the first opportunity that we've had ever to rent some of that space, and it's storage, it's short-term. This is a win-win. This is something that we can have, some revenue that we can have to offset our expenses. The alternative is the taxpayers pay the full shot of the expense of keeping this building up.
Councillor Batt?
Thank you. And if we are so hard-pressed for money that $800 is going to really push our bank accounts, we're in trouble. Never mind the fact that it was $150,000 to vacate all of that lost revenue of the tenants prior on such a premature basis a few years back, 4 or 5 years back. I'm feeling from Councillor Kett, and just the feel that I have, in order to have this passed, I think a sticking point is the rent. And as I stated, even in a standard U-Lock, so to speak, bare bones warehouse pricing, even to store your junk from your home, people are paying a heck of a lot more than this. And I'm thinking, in order to get this passed and to actually have it as a win-win, I would suggest that it's minimum $1,000 a month. $800 is way too low. It's not market value, and I don't think it sets a good precedent that somebody comes with an offer to the township. The township is not advertising this space for rent. They came, they have a need, and they dictate the price. As I said, I wish I lived in that world where I could dictate a price for rent. We're the landlord, and it needs to make sense. So I would say change that to $1,000, please.
So I'm looking at the two, mover and seconder, to accept it as a friendly amendment or if it's formal. Councillor Kett?
Mayor, I think that what Councillor Back said would give the township $12,000, which would be 50% of the cost, which I think is actually low as well, the $22,000. But I would definitely accept that, and I think that at that rate, I would support this.
So Councillor Guido?
I think it's very unfair of us to determine a cost without having a conversation with the person that would be the one paying that cost. And I'm not sure how we do this procedurally, but if he's not willing to pay $1,000 a month, it's going to be lost regardless. May I just ask a question? When we rented out the old hydro building to whatever construction company it was, were we negotiating back and forth, or did they come forth with a price and we accepted that because we were receiving revenue?
Look at the repairs they did.
Do you know, Spic? Has to do with the hydro building and the hydro trucks parking there. Well, maybe not 100% apples to apples, but without having the ability to discuss this, I would suggest that we'll call a recess for 10 minutes. It's about time for one anyways, and then we'll reconvene.
At least one thing. So how was the,
For the graduation.
well, I know.
I'm gonna go get coffee or something. I'll just come.
Yeah. Because you don't have any alcohol left in you.
Where are all the extra people here tonight? Who's that guy out there?
Oh, I don't know. Well, there's all those other things that have to go on too, right?
What thing?
See, Dirtbag Dancing was out there giving papers to Chris Holland.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh.
Oh, well. No. Removal of last sentence.
Yeah. Okay. So removal of the last sentence, seconder? Okay.
And I guess my main thing is, I guess with the rent that they're requesting to pay, still, as a gross rent, it's very, very inexpensive. I mean, that would barely pay for the expenses of a normal building. I mean, we're giving the taxes, we're giving the insurance, and we're giving the maintenance, the exterior maintenance for it. So it's a gross rental.
So,
well, I mean, before, 4 or 5 years ago, they were paying $12.85 gross, and now they're paying $6.85, or the request. I realize it's not comparables, but...
It's not occupied, and the tenant's taking on risk by doing the embracing that's required, and it's a month-to-month. It's really hard to get somebody to move into a spot with a month-to-month that they could be ousted. I would, knowing that I certainly wouldn't want to have a business in there where I don't have control over how long it's going to be, but the proposed tenant understands the circumstances around it, knows. So it's temporary in nature, and I think everything reflects that. I think if, the amount of time that would be lost in going out and getting that could be, calculated as part of having a lease 3 or 4 months before then. So I really think that we can kick this around for a long time, but
well,
an opportunity, and I would really, my personal view is that I want to be able to stand up in front of the public and say there's an opportunity to capture some of the costs, subsidize the cost of the mill being there, and the support of this council making the resolution for that to stay and go through the process and continue on with that. We've made it clear that we want to preserve the heritage value of that, and it comes with a cost that I want to make sure that I'm supporting on having funds come in, and if we find out later on this is a really long-term project, well then, things could be changed then, because we're on a month-to-month lease.
And I guess the last thing is, who's the one who wants to tell John Mackey that he can't have it? Because he requested it over a year ago for the Zamboni storage and to do the arena or the rink on the lake and the public skating for more of a community service.
Yeah, I think it's down to the financial part of it, right? I don't think there was any cost associated with the use of that. So, no, I understand what you're saying, but it's this council's prerogative. So, you have any more?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Councilor Drew? Sorry.
Thanks. I just would like to say, it sounds like there may be some opposition to this, and the alternative is we don't get any income. This is the first opportunity that we've had ever to rent some of that space, and it's storage, it's short-term. This is a win-win. This is something that we can have, some revenue that we can have to offset our expenses. The alternative is the taxpayers pay the full shot of the expense of keeping this building up.
Councillor Batt?
Thank you. And if we are so hard-pressed for money that $800 is going to really push our bank accounts, we're in trouble. Never mind the fact that it was $150,000 to vacate all of that lost revenue of the tenants prior on such a premature basis a few years back, 4 or 5 years back. I'm feeling from Councillor Kett, and just the feel that I have, in order to have this passed, I think a sticking point is the rent. And as I stated, even in a standard U-Lock, so to speak, bare bones warehouse pricing, even to store your junk from your home, people are paying a heck of a lot more than this. And I'm thinking, in order to get this passed and to actually have it as a win-win, I would suggest that it's minimum $1,000 a month. $800 is way too low, it's not market value, and I don't think it sets a good precedent that somebody comes with an offer to the township was not advertising this space for rent. They came, they have a need, and they dictate the price. As I said, I wish I lived in that world where I could dictate a price for rent. We're the landlord, and it needs to make sense. So I would say change that to $1,000, please.
So I'm looking at the two, mover and seconder, to accept it as a friendly amendment or if it's formal. Councillor Kett?
Mayor, I think that what Councillor Back said would give the township $12,000, which would be 50% of the cost, which I think is actually low as well, the $22,000. But I would definitely accept that, and I think that at that rate, I would support this.
So Councillor Guido?
I think it's very unfair of us to determine a cost without having a conversation with the person that would be the one paying that cost. And I'm not sure how we do this procedurally, but if he's not willing to pay $1,000 a month, it's going to be lost regardless. May I just ask a question? When we rented out the old hydro building to whatever construction company it was, were we negotiating back and forth, or did they come forth with a price and we accepted that because we were receiving revenue?
Look at the repairs they did.
Do you know, spec? Has to do with the hydro building and the hydro trucks parking there. Well, maybe not 100% apples to apples, but without having the ability to discuss this, I would suggest that we'll call a recess for 10 minutes. It's about time for one anyways, and then we'll reconvene.
No, that's the other part.
It doesn't break it down by buildings 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's all cumulative.
Stall new blocking, 50. $1,008? Is there blocking and
No, it's not blocking.
bridges?
It's just the supply and installation,
Oh, this is the best
new truss bridging, that's it.
Bridging. Okay, what about the blocking? I thought there was blocking, it had to go in there as well.
No, not in that building.
So where were they coming up with the 2,500? Hey,
Oh, my gosh.
because, you know what I wanted to do? I wanted to say that maybe take $200 a month off to
Let's
compensate
save
for
some money and shut the air conditioning off.
like, make it 1,000, but 200 off. And for 5 months, or 6 months. So it'd be 800 actually, but it would pay for the, what I was gonna do.
All right, we'll reconvene, and can everybody at the back hear me? 'Cause is that better? I don't know if it's, okay, I'll try and speak more clearly and loudly, so just wave your hands and one of us will see. So, thank you for the recess there. I just popped into the back there with the proponent and staff, and just to discuss the matter. It's very evident and clear that on a 6-month lease, there's quite a bit of risk taken on by the prospective tenant because of not only the trusses, but also the curb cut, and then the driveway granular that's there, and to also be removed afterwards. So you can understand on a 6-month lease to do that, and then if it was ended after 6 months, then it would have to be amortized over that short period. So the proponent, potential tenant, said it would be too much. However, I made the suggestion that if it was a 1-year lease at $1,000, he'd be agreeable to that. So I leave that to this council to decide if they want $1,000 and give some more security and a longer amortization period for those initial upfront costs, $1,000 a month for the 12 months, and then month to month thereafter, or to go with the 6-month lease at $800, or decide what you'd like. But that's my recommendation, to make it so that it's a fair option. So I look at council to see, to the mover and seconder. I haven't, Councillor Kett moved the motion, and Councillor Guido, and I'm in the chair, so I'm not making the amendment. I'm just asking if, given this information, I can leave the chair and make the amendment, but I'm just giving you the details of if this council wants a shorter lease, $800 would be agreeable. If it's $1,000, then to extend it and spread out the risk, and amortize it for $1,000 a month. So I'm just looking at the mover for comment, and the seconder, either one of you councillor, mover or seconder, can make comment, or...
I'll make a comment that I would support either option, so it's, I guess it would be up to the mover.
Okay, I had a bit of conversation with Director Heritage. So my conclusion after that was, if we left it at a 6-month term with renewals month to month after that, and made it $1,000 a month, and gave the lessee a credit of $200 per month for the first 6 to cover the costs, and after that it would be the $1,000. As we went over the costs.
Yeah, so that's not one of the two options that'd be agreed upon.
That's fine,
so
then we'll do the 12, I agree with the 12 months.
12 months?
Yep.
At $1,000, so mover and seconder, $1,000 for a 12-month term, month to month thereafter. Okay, mover and seconder, have that. Any questions from council? All right, so now we have a process here. We have to it's moved and seconded as amended, and once voting on that, we bring the bylaw, then there's going to be a process for that. Is that correct, Mr. Clerk? That only those first and second readings are for the bylaw, right?
That's correct, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, because the associating bylaw has a separate process. So this is just on the motion, all the amendments that were made and agreed upon, and then we're now agreed upon for the 12-month lease at $1,000 a month. Recorded vote by,
Thank you. At the request of the mayor, I'll read the motion that I have before you to now. That report, CORP 2018-10, Old Mill Lease to Old Flame Brewery be received. That section 6.04 be changed to no leasehold improvements are permitted, that the insurance identified within section 7.01 be changed from $2 million to $5 million, that section 3.02 remove the option for arbitration with regards to the rent increase, that section 12.07 assignment and subletting not be permitted, that section 4.03 be changed to remove the last sentence in regards to the occupancy of additional space in the building, that the rent within section 4.01 be changed to $1,000 per month, and that a bylaw as amended to authorize the mayor and clerk to execute the agreement with Old Flame Brewery Limited in the form appended as attachment 1 to reports URP 2018-10 be approved and brought forward for adoption.
So I just, okay.
That's already in the current version.
No, but there was the option to renew for the same term. I just want to make sure that's clear so we don't run into that.
It's not the same term, it's month to month after.
Month to month after that?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and yes, the lease, because it's 1 year within the current version that it's appended, it's 1 year, then month to month thereafter. So there's no change to the resolution in that regard. Okay. Councillor Drew?
Yes.
Councillor Back?
Yes?
Councillor Guido?
Yes.
Councillor Kett?
Yes.
Councillor Somerville?
Yes.
Mayor Rowett?
Yes. Okay, carries. 6 votes, 1 absent, motion carries. I said 6 yes, 1 absent, motion carries. Okay, so now the bylaw, which moved forward 50-18, which is the bylaw in relation to this, will be read a first and second time, and then just as amended. Then with all the amendments that were just read out, to be read the third time as amended. Questions on those? Seeing none, all those in favor? Oh. My apologies, we can't vote on something unless it's moved or seconded, so I need a mover and a seconder for those. Moved by Councillor Guido, seconded by Councillor Somerville. Again, I will read it first a second time, and then as amended, read a third time. Final questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Carried. Okay. Thank you very much. And next item is Councillor Somerville. We had the bylaw enforcement vehicle replacement. Are you moving the recommended report?
Yeah, yes I am.
Councillor Somerville, we need a seconder for that. Councillor Drew. Councillor Somerville.
Yes, just a question to Director Valentine. You have the replacement of the 1996 Ford Escape by law enforcement vehicle is an unbudgeted item. And the funding's not to exceed $34,250.91. And that'll be allocated from the MPR. So now we have a hole in our budget, do we not?
Do you mean, Mr. Mayor? Not really, no. This was not something that was identified. We do have, when we do close capital accounts, any excess funds or money that is left over in the accounts would go back to the respective reserves. So at this point, we don't have a capital closing right now. We will be bringing another one forward. So any any amounts that are under the actual budget amount will go back into the reserve. So it could be a wash. I don't have that information in front of me right now, but it would just come out of the reserve.
Okay. All right. I guess my reason why I'm asking, because it does leave I was concerned about the hole. Would it be advisable to allocate every year into a specific account budgeted money for our vehicles? Because we, just recently, we have purchased a lot of vehicles.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, it would be advisable. Our fleet is, we have had issues with our fleet, and my understanding prior to me to my coming here is there hasn't been a lot of replacement. So
Mhm.
we will be reviewing that. We will be reviewing the reserves and how that money is allocated and what it's to be used for.
So I think, but the reason why I'm asking that is because we've just, as I just said, we purchased a lot of new ones. So now we're at the top of the bucket now with all the new vehicles that we purchased. It would be time now to allocate to me money every year now towards vehicles, because another 10 years from now, perhaps, maybe shorter, maybe longer, we're going to have to start replacing vehicles again. So I would like to see that.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we don't have all new vehicles. There are still several that are in need of replacement, that some have been identified in our long-range capital forecast. It is advisable to put money aside for that. However, we are looking at priorities and what our asset priorities are. So right now, we've been focusing a lot on roads, but through our capital budget, we do review that every year, and we will be looking to see where the need is most.
Mm-hmm. I'd like to see that, because, like I said, we have purchased a lot of vehicles recently, so. Anyways, thank you. That's
Thank you.
all my question was. Thank you.
Any other questions on this? All right, seeing none, all those in favor? Carried. Next is item 9.2.17. It's my report. I'm going to move over there, and Councilor Brito's going to come over here, and Councilor Kett has declared pecuniary interest.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Will you be proceeding with a review of your report?
Yes, 9.217. Just wanted to summarize the report that council has before them. Just the link didn't work. I don't know if it didn't work for everybody else.
272 on our council agenda.
Okay. 272, so just wanted to highlight, I have a recommendation, but I'll come back to that, we did have a delegation, as you all recall, just bringing up some questions regarding the totals and the mileage expenses, and that this council passed a motion on the GPA minutes from item 9.2, and that was amended, and that the delegation by Howard Danson regarding council expense accounts be received, and that the finance department compile all of Councillor Kett's expense records from Councillor Kett to determine what expense, if any, should be paid back to the township, and the mayor report back by the end of February 2018. I do want to apologize for the tardiness of this coming back. I did have a report ready for the end of February, but through my final discussions with Councillor Kett, he had brought up some other discrepancies, so it took a great deal of time to investigate them. Further discussions were had with Councillor Kett, and a further review with staff on looking into the councillors' concerns and items that were brought forward. As part of the investigation, Mr. Danson had put forward quite a few questions, which after some detailed investigation on my own part, I was able to find the Revenue Canada T4130, which all of council has before you, and that's the CRA's Employer's Guide to Taxable Benefits and Allowances. I highlighted there that on page of the actual report, that if you were to go to page 278, that the guide is for not only for employees, but it includes those who hold an office. Reconvene, and can everybody at the back hear me? Is that better? I don't know if it's okay. I'll try and speak more clearly and loudly. So just wave your hands, and one of us will see. So, thank you for the recess there. I just popped into the back there with the proponent and staff, and just to discuss the matter. It's very evident and clear that on a 6-month lease, there's quite a bit of risk taken on by the prospective tenant because of not only the trusses, but also the curb cut, and then the driveway granular that's there, and to also be removed afterwards. So you can understand on a 6-month lease to do that, and then if it was ended after 6 months, then it would have to be amortized over that short period. So the proponent, potential tenant, said it would be too much. However, I made the suggestion that if it was a 1-year lease at $1,000, he'd be agreeable to that. So I leave that to this council to decide if they want $1,000 and give some more security and a longer amortization period for those initial upfront costs, $1,000 a month for the 12 months, and then month to month thereafter, or to go with the 6-month lease at $800, or decide what you'd like. But that's my recommendation, to make it so that it's a fair option. So I look at council to see, to the mover and seconder. Councillor Kett moved the motion, and Councillor Guido, I'm in the chair, so I'm not making the amendment. I'm just asking if, given this information, I can leave the chair and make the amendment, but I'm just giving you the details of if this council wants a shorter lease, $800 would be agreeable. If it's $1,000, then to extend it and spread out the risk and amortize it for $1,000 a month. So I'm just looking at the mover for comment, and the seconder, either one of you councillor, mover or seconder, can make comment, or...
I'll make a comment that I would support either option, so it's, I guess it would be up to the mover.
Okay, I had a bit of conversation with Director Heritage. So my conclusion after that was, if we left it at a 6-month term with renewals month to month after that, and made it $1,000 a month, and gave the lessee a credit of $200 per month for the first 6 to cover the costs, and after that it would be the $1,000. As we went over the costs.
Yeah, so that's not one of the two options that'd be agreed upon.
That's fine,
so
then we'll do the 12, I agree with the 12 months.
12 months?
Yep.
At $1,000, so mover and seconder, $1,000 for a 12-month term, month to month thereafter. Okay, mover and seconder, have that. Any questions from council? All right, so now we have a process here. We have to it's moved and seconded as amended, and once voting on that, we bring the bylaw, then there's going to be a process for that. Is that correct, Mr. Clerk? That only those first and second readings are for the bylaw, right?
That's correct, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, because the associating bylaw has a separate process. So this is just on the motion, all the amendments that were made and agreed upon, and then we're now agreed upon for the 12-month lease at $1,000 a month. Recorded vote by...
Thank you. At the request of the mayor, I'll read the motion that I have before you to now. That report, CORP 2018-10, Old Mill lease to Old Flame Brewery be received. That section 6.04 be changed to no leasehold improvements are permitted. That the insurance identified within section 7.01 be changed from $2 million to $5 million. That section 3.02 remove the option for arbitration with regards to the rent increase. That section 12.07, assignment and subletting not be permitted. That section 4.03 be changed to remove the last sentence in regards to the occupancy of additional space in the building. That the rent within section 4.01 be changed to $1,000 per month. And that a bylaw as amended to authorize the mayor and clerk to execute the agreement with Old Flame Brewery Limited in the form appended as attachment 1 to reports URP 2018-10, be approved and brought forward for adoption.
So I just, okay.
That's already in the current version.
No, but there was the option to renew for the same term. I just want to make sure that's clear so we don't run into that.
It's not the same term, it's month to month after.
Month to month after that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and yes, the lease, because it's 1 year within the current version that it's appended, it's 1 year, then month to month thereafter. So there's no change to the resolution in that regard. Okay. Councillor Drew?
Yes.
Councillor Back?
Yes?
Councillor Guido?
Yes.
Councillor Kett?
Yes.
Councillor Somerville?
Yes.
Mayor Rowett?
yes. Okay, carries. 6 votes, 1 absent, motion carries. I said 6 yes, 1 absent, motion carries. Okay, so now the bylaw, which moved forward 50-18, which is the bylaw in relation to this, will be read a first and second time, and then, just as amended, then with all the amendments that were just read out, to be read the third time, as amended. Questions on those? Seeing none, all those in favor? Oh. My apologies, we can't vote on something unless it's moved or seconded, so I need a mover and a seconder for those. Moved by Councillor Guido, seconded by Councillor Somerville. Again, I will read it first a second time, and then as amended, read a third time. Final questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Carried. Okay. Thank you very much. And next item is Councillor Somerville. We had the bylaw, enforcement vehicle replacement. Are you moving the recommended report?
Yeah, yes I am.
Councillor Somerville, we need a seconder for that. Councillor Drew. Councillor Somerville.
Yes, just a question to Director Valentine. You have the replacement of the 1996 Ford Escape bylaw enforcement vehicle is an unbudgeted item. And the funding's not to exceed $34,250.91. And that'll be allocated from the MPR. So now we have a hole in our budget, do we not?
Do you mean, Mr. Mayor? Not really, no. This was not something that was identified. We do have, when we do close capital accounts, any excess funds or money that is left over in the accounts would go back to the respective reserves. So at this point, we don't have a capital closing right now. We will be bringing another one forward. So any any amounts that are under the actual budget amount will go back into the reserve. So it could be a wash. I don't have that information in front of me right now, but it would just come out of the reserve.
Okay. All right. I guess my reason why I'm asking, because it does leave I was concerned about the hole. Would it be advisable to allocate every year into a specific account budgeted money for our vehicles? Because we, just recently, we have purchased a lot of vehicles.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, it would be advisable. Our fleet is, we have had issues with our fleet, and my understanding prior to my coming here is there hasn't been a lot of replacement. So we will be reviewing that. We will be reviewing the reserves and how that money is allocated and what it's to be used for.
So I think, but the reason why I'm asking that is because we've just, as I just said, we purchased a lot of new ones. So now we're at the top of the bucket now with all the new vehicles that we purchased. It would be time now to allocate to me money every year now towards vehicles, because another 10 years from now, perhaps maybe shorter, maybe longer, we're going to have to start replacing vehicles again. So I would like to see that.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we don't have all new vehicles. There are still several that are in need of replacement, that some have been identified in our long-range capital forecast. It is advisable to put money aside for that. However, we are looking at priorities and what our asset priorities are. So right now, we've been focusing a lot on roads, but through our capital budget, we do review that every year, and we will be looking to see where the need is most.
I'd like to see that, because, like I said, we have purchased a lot of vehicles recently, so. Anyways, thank you. That's
Thank you.
all my question was. Thank you.
Any other questions on this? All right, seeing none, all those in favor? Carried. Next is item 9.2.17. It's my report. I'm going to move over there, and Councilor Brito's going to come over here, and Councilor Kett has declared pecuniary interest.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Will you be proceeding with a review of your report?
Yes, 9.217. Just wanted to summarize the report that council has before them. The link didn't work. I don't know if it didn't work for everybody else.
272 on our council agenda.
Okay. 272, so just wanted to highlight, I have a recommendation, but I'll come back to that, we did have a delegation, as you all recall, just bringing up some questions regarding the totals and the mileage expenses, and that this council passed a motion on the GPA minutes from item 9.2, and that was amended, and that the delegation by Howard Danson regarding council expense accounts be received, and that the Finance Department compile all of Councillor Kett's expense records from Councillor Kett to determine what expense, if any, should be paid back to the township, and the mayor report back by the end of February 2018. I do want to apologize for the tardiness of this coming back. I did have a report ready for the end of February, but through my final discussions with Councillor Kett, he had brought up some other discrepancies, so it took a great deal of time to investigate them. Further discussions were had with Councillor Kett, and a further review with staff on looking into the councillors' concerns and items that were brought forward. As part of the investigation, Mr. Danson had put forward quite a few questions, which after some detailed investigation on my own part, I was able to find the Revenue Canada T4130, which all of council has before you, and that's the CRA's Employer's Guide to Taxable Benefits and Allowances. I highlighted there that on page of the actual report, that if you were to go to page 278, that the guide is for not only for employees, but it includes those who hold an office, to do with automobiles and motor vehicle expenses. On page 285, it goes into great detail on what is deemed personal driving, personal use of a vehicle, and regular place of employment. There are references to offices, etc., and through my interpretation of this, it is clear that this is the place of employment, and albeit that council may work from home, there is a council room provided here for the councillors to use, and that mileage is to be considered from the place of office, which is here, to and from meetings or the business of required of a councillor. Further to that, there were some reports that were part of our orientation binder that was attachment, sorry, if somebody has the attachment number, I think it was attachment 3. Yeah, attachment 3 on page 331, we had a council remuneration and expenses guideline, which identified the mileage guidelines that township, the mileage reimbursed councilors for the actual cost of their attendance. It talks about the council conferences, etc., but it also talks about attending events and mileage will be reimbursed. So it was followed up with an email clarification on page 333 on December 10th, 2014 that was sent to all of mayor and council, and it referenced answers to questions, and that Trina DeBruin, the Director of Finance, Treasurer at the time, had said she'd been asked to provide some further direction on claiming of mileage expenses for council members, so she clarified it, and that in previous discussions that she'd had with Revenue Canada about the issue, travel to your place of work is not mileage to be claimed for reimbursement. Therefore, travel to the municipal office or another municipal facility or for work-related meetings will not be a reimbursable expense. So there is the follow-up correspondence with that, and then there was also an attachment that included some Google Maps, which there are actually a few more, but the chart of the copy of the spreadsheet that's color-coded. A great deal of staff time was involved with pulling all this information, and then I had spent a great deal of time as well double-checking and vetting mileage and to the Google Maps, and then verifying events and actually looking at the items that Councillor Kett had put forward, and many of them I could vouch for and agree that Councillor Kett had actually undertaken those meetings, and some of the references are Smart City and ZTE and some other trips that he traveled on. There were some mileage that included mileage from the Google Maps from the Councillor Kett's home on the Fralix Beach versus the municipal office, so those were amended, and that's why there's two columns of Township Office column and the 305 Fralix Beach, and then the corresponding mileage. So I reviewed all this, and then came back with a recommendation of items I felt which were mainly the items from the Councillor Kett's place of residence and the municipal office. No other councillor had claimed for that there, as they well they shouldn't have. So my report included, as you see before you, the resolution, and I would I'd like to move that the mileage. My motion here was, whereas mileage for personal use is not an eligible expense as per the Canada Revenue Agency guidelines, and whereas Canada Revenue Agency Employer's Guide to Taxable Benefits and Allowances T4130 identifies personal use in regular place of employment, and whereas elected officials are subject to these federal rules, therefore it be resolved that the report, Mayor 2018-01, review of Councillor Kett expense be received, and that the Finance Department invoice Councillor Kett in the amount of $2,430.29 for all the mileage expense claims that have been submitted from to his personal residence to and from the Scugog Municipal Building, and any other mileage deemed personal use as summarized in the attachment 2, which was the spreadsheet, and that Councillor Kett be given 30 days to reimburse the municipality thereafter. Interest is to accrue on any unpaid balance of the prevailing municipal rate. So I'd like to move that. Madam Chair, if you could call for a seconder, that would be helpful, and then we can continue on with questions.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Is there a seconder? Councillor Somerville. Thank you. Okay, may I now ask council if they have any questions? Councillor Kett, you've declared a pecuniary interest, so you're not to speak to this matter.
I can still speak to the matter. I'm not voting.
I'm going to defer to the clerk here.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I can give no advice on pecuniary interests. under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. However, the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act does describe influencing the vote, so I'd just say that to council.
Thanks a lot, Clerk.
I'm aware of that.
Okay. I'm going to ask other councillors if there's any questions. Councillor Back?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, on all of these spreadsheets, Mr. Mayor, the yellow and purple and green, so the ones that are yellow that state, my gosh, I need glasses, likely reimbursable, possibly valid. What were the conclusions on that, of those yellow items, and what was the amount of that, and was that deducted?
So just to clarify, the color coding was staff's color coding on going through each of the items because they're not privy to all the meetings that are attended by councillors or with myself in attendance. So I truly didn't look at that as much as I looked at each line item, line by line, and the actual mileage it was to those specific ones. And then if there were items that were of question, it was also referred to, the Councillor Kett had a copy of all this as well, and I sat down and met with him, and then he came back with a list of concerns.
So were those concerns addressed? Were they reduced? I don't know what the amount going into this was, the gross amount versus questionables versus valid. I mean, we have an amount here of $2,430. Is there any outstanding items that still need verification by yourself or proof by Councillor Kett? So is there any possibility that this amount would be reduced or that a check could then be recut to Councillor Kett?
Well, I can just point to the page 329. On the bottom right-hand corner of that is the Excel formula sum total of that.
The 9,000?
Nope, that's on the following page, the page before that. There's a bottom right-hand corner is the sum formula of that entire column of amount owed. So each line goes across and it's carried forward, and if there's a difference or discrepancy in the mileage, then it's moved across there and then multiplied in the formula in the spreadsheet for the number of mileage. And you'll even see, Councillor Kett, that page that does have the total brought up a KRCA meeting that he met Rob Maservi in Lindsay, and I referenced that in the report that I deemed it as a township business expense and reversal of it. So not only did it get reversed, it got reversed back because that was part of the reversal from the KRCA reversals. So it actually shows as a minus, as a reduction to it. And then the other items, if you look across, you'll see they're mainly municipal meetings and committee meetings here at this location or in the town proximity.
Okay, so there's not that many that I see are minus, which to me then would be that you'd be taking off the amount. So are you stating that only one amount, the CRCA meeting with the CAO, was a reimbursable? The rest that Councillor Kett brought forth to you were not valid? Because there's a lot here that say possibly valid, possibly reinstate, likely reimbursable.
Yeah, no, if you look across on that last column, there's many that don't have numbers in it because they were deemed to be a meeting. So, trips to Granville Anderson for et cetera, the mileage was compared, Councillor Clark came 75, the distance from the municipal office is 79, distance from the house is 90, so we went with what was claimed for mileage because it was, I reviewed the mileage, and I'd stated in the report that many of these other ones are council, it's an honor system for the council to submit what meetings they're going to, so that's why you'll see when I reference that report that it's really focused in on the mileage from the place of residence to the
So it's just
municipal.
minor tweaking?
Yeah,
It's just minor expenses. I have a question with regards to going forward. Is there, because I know we have a new policy that was put in place, is that a better gatekeeper, so to speak, that when mileage or expenses from anyone, be it staff or councilors, that the vetting process, so to speak, going forth through the financial department, that items like this would not happen again?
Through you, Madam Chair, that is the intention, yes. So by bringing forward the new mileage policy, we've put stipulations of from and to for conferences and things. We're now asking for Google Maps and things like that. So there's, yes, more auditing.
More auditing, and also more if there happens to be inadvertently a mistake by a staff member or a counselor, that there's sort of protocols in place that sort of, as I say, gatekeep to sort of flag it and say, wait a minute, there's something here, there's a discrepancy, can you please re-verify the distance, because, you know, once checks are cut, it's difficult to bring it back, right?
If I may, through the chair, I do want to stress, though, that it is not staff's responsibility to vet these submissions. Just like when I submit something to the region, the submission goes through, and it's my responsibility to make sure it's accurate. Staff, basically, you're signing off on that. You're accountable to your own signature, your own actions, your own submission. Even if you're taking the money without a signature, you're still accepting that what you've submitted is, you believe to be correct. So I would just want to stress that, you know, the double checking or the occasional audit from staff, we wouldn't want them to be going through each line item and having to vet and call the person who's described on it, did they have a meeting or not a meeting and all that. There is an honor system to submitting these expenses, just like you would anywhere. And then we also, as you referenced, the new policy in place requires me to sign off for councillors, which it didn't in the past, and it also requires more oversight and sign off from the department heads. So I think that policy, which has already been passed, helps clarify that. And I also referenced in the report that if the new policies, or if there's a desire for the council to implement a flat mileage or a compensation of flat mileage in the future, like some other municipalities do, then I would suggest that this council give direction for staff to have a report back for comparative municipalities in Durham Region and our comparator group for the next term of council. But I know that some municipalities, they view it as it takes away any sort of mileage because you're just getting the flat amount and there's no mileage sheets to submit. But I also know that some councillors win, some councillors lose. The councillors that live close by, they're getting a flat mileage reimbursement without having to submit any claims, where people who live far away, it may be, they're getting the short end of the deal on that. So it's not a perfect world. I don't think there is a perfect way to do this without having the extra time. So the mileage submission, the way it is still fair, and it still should match the actual expenses that are incurred.
Any further questions, Councillor Back? Councillor Cat, with your best interest in mind, I will defer to the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. When present at meeting at which matter considered, where a member either on his or her own behalf or while acting for, by, with, or through another has any pecuniary interest, direct or indirect, in any matter, and is present at a meeting of the council or local board at which the matter is the subject of consideration, the member, B, shall not take part in the discussion of or vote on any question in respect to the matter, and C, shall not attempt in any way, whether before, during, or after the meeting, to influence the voting on such questions. Are there any other members of council with any questions? Seeing none, I will put this through to a vote. As the motion reads in our council agenda, does anyone need it read? All those in favor? Carried.
Okay, so, no bylaws? Okay, all right, so, we've dealt with all the bylaws, the ones with the consent agenda were done, and these ones here, agendas were just the confirming bylaw for today. That's it? Oh, yes. Sorry, I want to make sure we catch all the titles on here. We have, notice of motions, item 11, see none. 12, new business, general. Any new business? Councilor Guido?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and if you will just indulge me for one moment while I retrieve my email. All of council received a correspondence from one of my constituents that live in Ward 2 regarding the warrant of a four-way stop at the corner of Old Simcoe and Victoria Avenue. It was the request of the author of this email that staff undertake a review of all four-way stop signs that were implemented prior to the warrant assessment being put into place. The particular stop sign in question was installed in 1999 based on a petition from the residents that they felt that they required that four-way stop. In correspondence back and forth with the resident, we advised him that while it's unfortunate that his wife received a traffic violation ticket at that stop sign due to, I believe it was visibility from a surrounding hedge, that the best way for him to bring forward any of his concerns would be via petition from the surrounding residents to advise that they've as well had the feeling that it was an unsafe intersection with the four-way stop there. As the ward councillor, this is the first I have heard from any of the residents that drive this very busy four-way stop or road, that they have a concern with the safety of this four-way stop. In saying that, I asked our director, Director Coleman, if she could seek a legal opinion based on some of the questions that the requester had asked regarding township's liability to have a four-way stop in place at an unwarranted intersection. And based on the feedback that we received from our legal, and I will read it if I'm allowed, it says, "Good morning. I think the most logical and responsible approach is to leave the four-way stops in place that are pre-policy regardless of whether they meet the current policy or not. Moving forward, for new ones, apply the policy." So that is from the Township of Scugog's legal representation. So at this point, I would like to just state that we have done our due diligence from a municipality, and at this point, we only have one resident who has voiced concerns with that four-way stop. And if I may do so, ask that this correspondence is answered to the email requester. And do I need 2/3 to set that direction?
If you're putting forward a motion, sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor, to council, if you're putting forward a motion, then yes, certainly staff can take that as direction and do that if you wish.
Perfect, and that's what I would like to do.
Okay. Staff accepted that direction. Is there any other new business?
No, thank you, not for myself.
Any other councilors, new business? All right, no closed meeting. Confirming bylaw, I need a mover and seconder for this. Moved by Councilor Guido, seconded by anybody, Councilor Drew. Confirming bylaw. Proceedings of the regular meeting held Monday, June 25th, 2018, be read a first, second, and third time and finally passes 25th day of June 2018, and the mayor and clerk are hereby directed to sign same and affix corporate seal thereto. All those in favor? Carried. So it's our last meeting, scheduled meeting, so I want everybody to have a safe and happy summer. We'll see everybody at Canada Day, I hope, and be safe, enjoy, and there's no planned special meetings, but you never know. So, well, on that note, moved by Councillor Guido for adjournment, seconded by Councillor Somerville. All those in favor? Carried.